Welcome, everyone. It's the Grace Course podcast. Regular guest Dan Heroy here with us. If you're watching, you can see his wonderful Buffalo Bills hat,
Sure.
if that's important to you guys. If it's especially important to you guys, some of you will be checking out right now. You know,
They just made the
listening to
playoffs.
podcast,
Yeah.
written off. So, yeah. Dan's been on the podcast a bunch of times. We
Regular
should just
guest.
have
I
a
like
good
that.
chat, and that's why he's a regular guest.
Yeah.
So, yeah. He'll
All
probably
we
be
do-
a regular guest again, probably in April when I come to stay with you guys in
amazing.
New England. And we're going to do some stuff there.
Do some
but yeah,
stuff.
we're just going to banter, I guess, about, we want to talk deconstruction. We want to talk about cognitive dissonance and a whole bunch of different things, how we process changing beliefs and things like that. So yeah, it's going to be good. But Dan, how you doing?
Doing good, man. It's just going to be a natter away, you know? I mean, we're just going to talk about whatever comes to mind. So this might be a little bit of a different podcast than just like a traditional interview, right? Which we like.
And very different from my last, I think 8 podcasts were just a series, and they were all like 2 hours of information, just jam-packed information.
Right.
So this is going to be...
Definitely, that's not going to happen here.
It's going to be great information, but it's going to be a lot more soft, hopefully more... gentle in its approach, and probably a bit more funny.
I would hope so.
So yeah, a bit more funny. I don't know if that's a sentence that works, but it's okay.
I mean, basically, the thing with us too is we're just going to talk about whatever comes to mind, maybe some of those topics and probably others, and then we're going to kind of loosely throw out some ideas that may or may not be true, that we may or may not believe, and
100%.
Be a little wishy-washy. It's going to annoy people, but that's not our intent. Our intent is just to have a good talk about things.
Yeah,
and see what sticks.
Both you and I love to play devil's advocate as well.
Sure.
And so 9 times out of 10, we can end up having an argument where I'm arguing for your position and you're arguing it for mine because we've chosen to take the opposite point.
That's pretty true.
There's a very safe bet. Don't hold either of us too strongly to what we say in a podcast. But yeah, I think we will on the whole here. Oh man, you've broken up already. We're like a minute in.
Yeah.
You there?
It glitched on me there.
You glitched out hard. Okay, we're good. Sorry, you're about to say something.
Let me just say, it cut me off. That's a bad sign. I'll just say that, it does come across a bit wishy-washy, like I said, at times where we go, well, I think this is true and that's true, but whatever. We'll kind of bail out in the end. And it's not for lack of actual beliefs or believing that, anything is true and whatever you believe is true is true. Like, I don't believe that. Maybe Phil does. We'll find out. But I don't like to be pinned down on a authoritative, this is the only way type statement. And I know, especially coming from a church background, faith background, there is a need for that in church. I can see that. And there is a lot of that in church. But I don't like to speak in those terms, not because I don't believe that something is true, but just because sometimes I haven't figured out what that thing is, right? Yeah. And we're going to get into that with some of the deconstruction stuff. But I also don't want people to think, oh, he just believes whatever he wants to at whatever time he wants to. It's not that, it's not that simple.
I think speaking for myself, I don't want to speak for you, but for me, I want to live convicted of what I believe. So I do have a belief. I have sets of beliefs in different areas of life, and I live as though those beliefs are true. That's how I think most human beings operate. However, I don't cling to those beliefs as though they cannot change, nor when I live as those beliefs are true, do I ever at any point think it's likely that they're not likely to change at some point, or there's an opportunity for them to change. And so I believe this is true and I'm going to live this way, but I'm also very open for someone coming along. You come on a podcast, go, Phil, what about this? And I go, oh, I don't know. Right. And I'm really open for it to challenge my belief that I'm living as much as I can be. And of course, that's something that we all struggle with doing. None of us like to change our belief and find out we're wrong. But yeah, so I think, for me, I want to live convicted of something, live as though something matters,
Right.
So if I believe that someone living homeless and poor is a bad thing and they deserve some sort of meaning in life and care, and they deserve some shelter and they deserve to have a meal for the next day, I'm going to live convicted of that and make sure they can eat. I'm going to try and help them have some shelter. But
now, Phil, let me play the other side to that. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but it's important for us to live convicted. You know, like if you have a belief that people, you know, are valuable, you need to live like people are valuable. You know, you can't just consistently go, well, yeah, but I don't know that they're valuable. Who knows? So let's just wait and sit on the fence the whole time. We have to,
Right.
at some point, start living out our beliefs.
And some beliefs you would hope are concrete enough to last. We don't want our beliefs to change all the time, but like you're saying, you're open to them if they're challenged. And yeah.
Well, I would say any belief is open to change. Many beliefs have a higher probability of change than others.
There you go.
So, for example, you brought up, before we started the call, you brought up something called the Enneagram. And you were saying, are you into that? And I'm like, I just haven't explored this yet. I've done a couple of tests, and I'm like, I just don't see how it's that important or that relevant, and I'm not that interested. Now, because I've not looked into it a lot, I am very open to it being quite important and massive impact to me. But I'm not going to live like it does because I don't have any real evidence of that yet. And so I'm going to go on with my day-to-day life. But if someone hits me with some really good data on how this could help me, I'm going to quite quickly change. You know, whereas there's other things in my life where, you know, maybe my faith personally in the person of Jesus, that you take any component of that. Jesus is God, for example, right? So I believe personally that the person of Jesus is God in flesh. Now, that's my belief, and I'm going to live convicted of that. But I'm going to be open to something happening that I don't know, Allah walked in the room just now and was like, hey, Phil, that's slightly wrong. It's all good, though. Let's work around it. I'd be like, I'm going to have to think some stuff through, right? But I'm pretty confident, based on my experience, based on the fact that I have devoted my entire life to studying this, to researching this, to having a relationship with Jesus, to living the life of Jesus as best I can, following his way. I'm pretty confident that that's a lot less likely to change than my opinion of the Enneagram.
Right.
You know, so there's probability changes here in the things. Gravity. You know what? If some scientist goes, hey, we're slightly off, gravity is not quite right, or it doesn't quite work the way we thought it did, I'm like, okay, cool. You guys know more than me, sure. But generally speaking, I have no reason to change my thoughts on gravity, and I don't see it being probable that it's going to change in my life.
Right.
And so, you know, there's constantly things that are up for challenge, but the degree to which
probabilities,
they're likely to be changed is going to vary. And I think we all have those things where if people challenge you on something, you're probably like, don't really care. I don't have a bone in that fight. And that's probably a factor as well, right? So the more I've bought into something, there's a concept of buy-in, which is an interesting component where the more we buy into a theory or a belief, the less likely we are going to be able to change that theory or belief or accept alternative theories and beliefs, which is really scary for us as Christians, right? Or anyone that holds to a very strong belief about something. It could be scary for someone as a Democrat or a Republican, right? I mean, that's their view, or any of these kind of identities that we buy into.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been, you know, looking into a little bit of that lately. I mean, it's a popular topic, like confirmation bias, right? That's kind of come into the forefront of conversation the last couple of years. And people like Robert Cialdini, you know, psychologists and people that study human behavior have written some really interesting studies on that, where we think as Christians, as like people with political leanings, with people with opinions, that let's say 90% of what we believe is based on fact. We'll maybe give ourselves 10%. There's 10% emotions involved. Yeah, you know, I'll give it that some of my beliefs might be based on emotions, but 90% of what I believe is fact because I've studied it, I've really thought hard about it, and it's just true because I know it's true and I've proven it to be true. The people that are studying this confirmation bias stuff, like Robert Cialdini and others, are going, let's probably flip those numbers. Way more likely that 90% of what we believe is based on emotion, and there's probably 10% fact sprinkled in there for most people. And if once you kind of understand that a lot of your beliefs, and I'm not just talking spiritual beliefs or political beliefs, but everything you believe, if you understand that's how humans primarily operate a lot of the time, is with confirmation bias, where you already have your beliefs established way up front, and everything else from there, 9 out of 10 times, for survival factors, for just ease of life factors, we just support that belief we already have.
Yeah.
And there's macro and micro ways of doing that. So it's really interesting to dig into that and see, a lot of us do that all the time. And if you are aware of it, maybe you can help yourself to not do it so much, or at least be aware when you're doing it, or be aware when others are doing it. And it can become a really helpful thing to know about, for sure, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you say that since becoming aware of something like confirmation bias, has that been something that you've had moments of since where you go, oh, I might be doing this?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
It's in the back of my mind all the time now. It's not obsessive. It's not like, oh, that thing I just thought. Do I believe that, or is that blah? No, but it's just back there a little bit, going, oh, I had a really strong reaction to this news story, and I thought I was right, and this person that's talking is really presenting their opinion like they're 100% right, and both sides think I have the facts. This other person's a bit, flaky or emotional. And you just got to go, well, it's possible I might be too on this. And then kind of go from there and just navigate what your beliefs are, maybe look into things a little bit further if it's important. There's a lot of things that are, just mundane, that we might have an opinion on. So it's not going to be a crucial thing, but, the bigger subjects in life, relationships and spiritual stuff, maybe politics and stuff like that, we probably should dig into a little bit deeper and not just go with the default we've always gone with, because it's probably a default that got established and we've just gone from there. Because for humans, it's really hard to change out of a concrete belief system, right? This is your whole life dealing with this. You can lose your church community, you can lose your family community, your political community.
Yep.
To say you might be wrong, there's actual repercussions from that could be major, right?
No, huge. So
huge.
Like, I mean, there's 110 different things like flying through my mind as we're talking. So I'm trying to practice the whole thing of like, listen, don't like start going on the rabbit trails in my mind. But the first thing that I think of with that is like, we as humans are wired not for truth. Like our brain has no desire for truth. Our brain is wired for safety. Our brain is wired for survival.
Right. That's what they say. Yeah.
And so when you are faced with truth, your brain doesn't care, is this true or not? What your brain cares about, as we're talking about the brain as if it's like a independent thing that's sitting there like with a pen and paper, like, but generally speaking, that we're wired to go, is this putting me in danger or is this going to keep me safe? And generally speaking, when we face something that's going to contrast with our way of life, which we know is safe, we go, oh, I don't know if this is going to be safe. It might be dangerous. This might not be safe. And so the brain is constantly weighing this up. And I think there's certain people with dispositions that enjoy the questioning things and looking at from different angles, who may find it less dangerous to explore things. Because
the Phil Drysdales of the world.
Well, I was going to say like you, so honestly, I would consider you as someone that is quite open to exploring different views, giving people a lot more grace than a lot of the population do. I can be very, very opinionated, and at times people come up with a different idea, and I can be really quick to argue with that, and I'm getting better at that. I really believe I've been trying to get intentionally better at that, but I still think I can be quite argumentative. You're very much like, oh, well, tell me more about it. I want to learn where you're coming from. I want to understand. And so do you think that there are people that will have and you may have said this more than me, but I've not studied it enough to know, do you think some people are predispositioned to be more self-aware of something like of cognitive bias? Because I know about cognitive bias, but it's not something I think about all the time, whereas it sounds like you're like really processing through that lens.
Well, that's a great, because you know what, I've always had a awareness of that's probably going on well before I ever heard that phrase or looked into studying it more. So let's just pick on politics. Just, it's so easy. We usually use like really basic like analogies and stuff, but that's fine. That's what we have to work with. I say we when I'm doing it.
No, I did as well.
Okay. So let's look at politics. I've always known, it just seems so obvious to me from a young age that both sides in politics, in America, we have like mostly a two-party system. So you got Republicans and Democrats, and they both just are so irrational a lot of times with their beliefs, right? Their person could do the same thing that the other person does, but when the other person does it, they hate it. When their person does it, it's a free pass. Right. But they seemingly don't know they're doing it.
They can't see it.
They can't see it. And I've always just gone, I see it from both sides. I don't want to be like that. And again, I probably am more than I know, but at least I know, okay, I want to at least try to be rational when It's so emotional between like a two-party thing, my team, their team. So from a young age, I've always like, I'm independent. I don't get involved in like the heated, like super emotional discussions and debates. I just don't engage with that because it is so divisive and it's so dual, you know, that there's something going on there. Because you can see if you are looking from a outside perspective, so to speak, you can see what's going on, where it's just if the letter switches, the argument switches, you know, 180, you know.
So interesting. So we just had a big election this week. I don't know when this will go live. Probably, I don't know, either this week or I'll push it through to next year. But we just had an election next year. So open termed, you know,
right.
Like, you know, expect this August.
Sometime.
No, probably the first week of next year. But we just had this huge election in the UK, very important. And again, very much between two parties. There's kind of 5-6 main parties, but between two parties, really.
Yeah.
And what I did, because I wasn't well enough informed about all the policies of all the different parties, really. There was a website that broke down each party's kind of manifesto to like 20 different points. They went through like, oh, this is what they say about crime. This is what they say about healthcare. This is what they say about housing. This is what they say about, you know, the foreign policy or whatever. And what you would do is you click the topic like foreign policy and it would open up and then it would give you some bullet points. And it would say, these are the bullet points of one of the parties. Do you like it or do you not like it? And then you'd say whether you liked it or not. And you go, I don't know. Yeah, I like that. I don't like that. I don't like it. I think overall I like it. So you'd say I'd like it. And it would give you another bunch of bullet points and say, this is another party's. What do you like? What do you not? And you go through it. And at the end, it gave you the ones that you said you liked. It said, here's the 3 out of the 5 or 6 that you like the most. Which one do you like the most of those 3? And you'd select one and go, that's probably the one I like the most. And you do this for all these 20 different points. And at the end, it would say, okay, so you voted 20% for this party, about 30% for this party, and about 50% for this party. So actually, you know, of the 5, you didn't like some of them completely, but across the 5, about 3 you quite liked.
Right.
And suddenly it highlighted to me how we can so often, so many people are like, so in the UK, it's largely Labour versus Conservative, which would be similar to a Republican Democrat kind of idea. And so same in America, right? So often we're like, well, I'm a Republican. You know, or I'm a Democrat. My dad was a Democrat, and we're Democrats in this area, or we're Democrats because we work in this type of industry, or we're we're Republicans because we're part of this religion, or whatever it is. You know, there's some association. But actually, I think if we were to be honest and break down the thousands upon thousands of nuances within politics and say, where do you land on this topic without any knowledge of which party says what?
Yeah,
we'd often find we are bouncing backwards and forwards between these two polar extremes quite often. Yeah, because we don't have some extremist version of that either side of it. Really.
Right.
Maybe like 1 in 1,000 of us is that extreme.
Yeah.
But most of us are probably a bit of a blend of all these different.
Probably. But a lot of times it seems to boil down to 1 or 2 big things, and you stick with those big things. Like I care about taxes, and this party does this with taxes. I like that. I'm that, and you ignore the million other points, like you're saying, right? So sometimes we just go with the biggest thing. I like this type of church service, so I'm Methodist, I'm Catholic, I'm Greek Orthodox. I like this big thing. I'm not going to get into the million conversations we can have about nuances. So there's people that do the macro decision, and then there's people that do the micro, and a lot of people in between, right?
And we probably have to do that to some degree in life, right? At some point we go, okay, well, I'm not a politician. I'm going to go through 10,000 policies. I did this survey, and it was like, it took me about 30 minutes, I think. And I remember at the end of it thinking, it's better be worth it. And I'm like, I'm voting for like the future of my nation, for the decisions that will affect my grandkids. You know, like if you believe in politics and voting is important, like this isn't a big important thing. And I'm like, oh, stupid 30 minutes to make myself, you know? So it's the same with like our faith, right? We're like, well, I just, this is the real main thing I really care about is like full immersion baptism. I don't really care about, you know, like about Holy Spirit or what you believe about this. You know, within that's we pick our things that are the most important,
I know.
Right? But to some degree we have to, don't we? I mean, like, and to some degree, I understand with something like politics, a lot of people who would look at a specific thing and go, well, that's a life and death issue. That's a, you know, personal preference, or at least that's a life and death issue for people that I really care about that are close to me. And that's a life and death issue for people that are far away or very different. Even that is I have to be honest, we kind of do that to some degree, right? Whether I like it or not, I kind of care more whether my wife dies than whether some stranger's wife dies. And if I'm voting on a policy that's arbitrary and it doesn't really affect that, or it doesn't affect me because it affects that stranger's wife that I don't really know or have any connection to.
Yeah.
I really am caring about this policy I can look at and I know that's going to make my wife homeless or, or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
or die or whatever.
Right.
And so I think there's all these different levels of stuff going on that we don't really consciously engage with. I think most of the time, most of it is also conscious, right?
Very much so. I've also been doing, like some reading in that field of it. You would be shocked and amazed, both those things, if you knew how influenced we can be by seemingly just really obscure and non-important things. They've done a lot of studies on, somebody buying something. So if you go into a shop that's playing German style music in the background, they did a test. People were like 50% more likely to buy German or Swiss chocolate, stuff like
Wow.
that. There's like, eons and eons of tests like this where people are simply manipulated in a lot of ways, way more than we think we are. Because again, we think we're basing everything we do on facts and study. And I just know it. And I've thought about this. I've reasoned this. I've rationale this. And then you see humans get triggered really easy by just subtle tricks. So I say tricks, that sounds nefarious. It's not necessarily nefarious. It's just the way we tend to be wired, where we're going to associate and help people that are more similar to us. And, maybe it's part of the same culture, race, church, whatever, political affiliation, sports team affiliation. All these things really trick our brains into thinking, oh, this person's like me. I'm going to somehow associate and help this person or whatever. So there's a lot of things going on that we have no idea are going on. That's basically the point of this long-winded thing, is like, we're not aware at all about all the factors that are going into our decision-making process. We think it's just us making a decision, but it's really not that simple.
So how does this play into faith, do you think? If we boil it down and kind of bring it back down to maybe our tradition is within Christianity, and that's kind of where we stand, probably charismatic evangelical Christians. Where do you see this play out in the average life of evangelicals, maybe yourself and your journey? Or
it has to be an integral role, right? If this is going on constantly all the time, where there's these other outside factors that are, again, I don't, but, they're influencing us in ways to make decisions and believe certain things. That has to be a part of how we've gotten to where we are in our current belief system, our current belief structure. So just knowing that goes, oh, well, maybe I haven't actually dug into what I really believe about this doctrine or this thing we do at church or that thing. I'm not sure. Christians might get, or anybody might be like, oh, well, so you think that it's just so random, why I believe what I believe now, and 9 out of 10 things are not fact-based, and so everything's wishy-washy. No, I'm not saying that. What you believe could be true. It could be based in fact, but there also could be other things that aren't, or it could be a little bit of a mixture, right? So it just, as long as you're open, like you've been saying, to pry into what you believe a little bit deeper, to maybe deconstruct things a little bit deeper that haven't really been looked into yet, or on a deeper level, I think that could be a helpful tool. To some people, absolutely. To some people, maybe not. To some people, it could be really destructive.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a reason that we have cognitive dissonance. Like I said, it's to keep us safe. And so, and there's a degree of what that safety looks like, right? So sometimes it looks like, oh, I just feel a bit like I'm like a bit upset that I was wrong. That's a very minimal sense of like your brain going, well, I don't want that. That's a bit dangerous. I don't want it, right? Versus, someone that might be quite mentally unstable going through something where they suddenly believe something is wrong and they realize they've had, I spoke to a pastor, I'll keep it completely anonymous because it's a really very profoundly devastating thing, to be honest with you. But I spoke to a pastor a few months ago, and he went through my series that I did on homosexuality, which was, for those that don't know, it's like an open-ended kind of look at the topic of homosexuality. So I have 3 different views that are the common views of within Christianity, how to approach that topic. And generally I went through all the Bible verses and said, how do each person, if I have a person in each of those views, how do they interpret that scripture, right? Which has their own biases and pros and cons and all that. And how do they view history, and how do they view the science, and how do they view this? And so we just kind of left it open. But anyway, he came to me and he said, look, I have been in one of those three positions my whole life, and I have been so categorically, and I've probably been at the extreme of that position where I've been frankly very, very antagonistic towards people who are homosexual. And he's very open about this, and I've been like that in some ways in my path, and so there's no judgment of that, and I think that's if anything, it's a very very honorable thing to be able to say that and say, but I'm not sure about that anymore, and I'm challenged by that. But he had said, I've actually, through going through your series and through different things that have happened in my life, I've come to the conclusion that I'm actually pretty much on the other end of the spectrum. So he's gone through, because there's quite a broad spectrum of how to approach this. But he says, I've come to the other end, and he says, now I've been a pastor, and he says, in my 15 years of being a pastor, he says, I've spoken about homosexuality quite a few times in the pulpit. I've met with homosexuals over coffee to help them because they've come to me and said, I'm gay and this and that. And he says, in my 15 years, 2 of the people in my congregation have committed suicide because they were gay. And he said, and I am realizing that on some level, I'm not the only responsibility here or the only, reason or anything. He's saying on some level, I'm coming to terms with the fact that I've been a part of them choosing to kill themselves, probably. Whether it's me personally or the environment I created, the culture I created that didn't accept people that were in that background. And I thought, I was thinking about this guy, and I was like, what amazing self-awareness. Because if there's ever a danger signal that you're trying to stop, it's like coming to terms with the realization that you might have caused someone's death. With no malice intended. He genuinely believed what he believed, and he's now genuinely believes he was wrong and is trying to deal with that. But it just shows that the degree to which some of our beliefs can play out, and then what it costs to change that belief. The cost for that man to have gone through that series and gone, I think I might be wrong. For some of us to make that change one way or the other, or to come a different view on homosexuality, doesn't really have a massive impact because we haven't maybe known someone that was of a different sexuality, or maybe we don't have anyone close to us, or maybe we're very vocal about what we believed, or maybe we weren't very prejudiced or welcoming one way or another. And so it doesn't make a big difference for us to have this change of belief. But for other people, that's a huge, huge cost.
Right.
And I'm just amazed by, and this is why I was thinking back when I was saying to you, like, do you think certain people are have a greater self-awareness or ability to be self-aware, an ability to go, I'm willing to make this shift? Because I see it in me. I mentioned to Tilly the other day, I was reading this article. It was about personality, a certain personality defect that I had a preconceived idea about, and I'd been talking to her about it. I was like, I've been reading about this type of personality, and I think it's really interesting. I think it could mean this. And she was like, oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I could see how that might mean that. And I went and researched a few papers. I was reading 2 or 3 papers, and as I was reading the papers, it turns out it doesn't mean that at all. There's no correlation of data, and there just is no evidence that works. It's not that it's saying it doesn't work, but there's just nothing to say it does. And I remember as I'm reading through it, I was like, I don't want to believe these scientific researchers that have gone through, 100 people and done a case study, and I'm looking at the data, and I'm looking at the data points, and I'm looking at the probability of margin of error is like, 0.01, and, all these things. And I'm like, okay, I know this to be true. And I'm in myself going, but I want this idea that I had to be true. And that was one of the first times in my life I was like, oh, I'm getting a bit more self-aware that I'm noticing that. Because how many times have I done that in my life and just closed that report or that, write-up or whatever, closed it and just moved on and pretended that I didn't see it and just taught what I wanted or believed what I wanted.
Yeah, I mean, classic cognitive dissonance. Yeah. So, I mean, the typical, like the cliche example for cognitive dissonance type stuff would be smoking. Somebody that knows smoking's bad, knows smoking will eventually, probably kill them if they're, smoking a pack a day or whatever it might be, but still smokes.
Yeah.
So there's that dissonance there that goes, I know it's bad. I know it's probably going to kill me, or it's going to kill other people. Maybe it won't kill me, or I can get away with it somehow. You start kind of maybe rationalizing, justifying, trying to find a loophole, or not, but you're just living with this tension of, I know it's bad, I'm still going to do it. How about this one, to bring it back to like a church area, because of the example you gave with your friend there, the pastor. Pastors are faced with the tithing one a lot. I feel like there might be a lot of cognitive dissonance. I don't want to project onto pastors, but there could be a lot of cognitive dissonance with the tithing question, where, again, this is a little nuanced, but whether you believe you're under the curse of the old covenant way of tithing now in your church, if people don't tithe, even if a pastor might see your points because you've had a lot of good resources out there. You've put out a lot on tithing and what tithing means for today in the church. Even if they go, yeah, Phil's probably right, but if I agree with what Phil just put out there, I'm going to lose my tithe.
I don't pay my bills, right? Yeah.
So we're gonna keep going with the tithe. I have this cognitive dissonance where I know Phil's right, but I'm not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
You know.
And this shows as well that cognitive dissonance is such a short-sighted element as well. So think of the smoking, right? We talk about the brain keeping us safe and rejecting danger. Well, what's more dangerous than dying of lung cancer? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's a pretty big danger. But it's not. It doesn't care about that. It cares about the hormones right now that make it feel safe. The rush that you get from having a cigarette.
It's the only product I've ever seen. I've literally seen it. There's like pictures of like people with lung cancer on it, and it's awful. Like, this will kill you.
Looking at the packaging, right?
Right. Yeah. But it will say, this will kill you. You know, this will cause you to die. I've seen that written on it in like other countries, especially there's like stricter rules with what they have to put on there. And people are buying it. Like, oh, this will kill me? Yeah, sure. I'll take 5 packs, right?
Yeah.
Cognitive dissonance at its best, right?
Absolutely. But the pastor looking at that tithing, so I've dealt with a lot of pastors over the years. It's even a lot more so when I was traveling a lot, because I'd meet hundreds of pastors a year when I was like staying with them, and teaching in their churches and stuff. And they knew what I taught on tithing because it was all on my website. But
back when you were like welcomed into churches and stuff.
Yeah, well, I was a lot more, I played the party line a bit more probably, yeah. But yeah, I would go into these churches and they knew I was teaching on tithing. I would never do that in their church. It's not my place to say I should run those things. So I would never openly speak about finances with churches anyway. It's probably why I have no money. But I would talk with these pastors behind the scenes because they would say to me, hey, I've seen your article on tithing. Like, can you talk to me about that? What do you think? Do you think I'm wrong by doing this? And talk to and a lot of them, we had really healthy conversations and we came to difference of opinion, and that was that. But a lot of them said, you know what, I kind of agree with you that I do think tithing is wrong. But I just
now back to the tithe.
Well, yeah, but I don't know how to deal with it, right? I don't know how to not do this. So one case I remember strongly, we had this great conversation on the Saturday night, all about tithing. He's like, you know, I've known this for years. I really strongly feel that tithing isn't quote unquote biblical or mandated for Christians. But then I remember in his sermon in his service, sermon's probably a bit too, it's a Freudian slip. In his service right before my message, there was a 5-minute kind of call for a tithe, for people to give their tithe. Yeah. And then I went up and taught, and I remember thinking as I was teaching, I'm like, wow, we just had like a 2-hour conversation the night before about how the pastor didn't really believe in tithing and thought it wasn't really actually very fair to say it's a biblical thing you have to do, God wants you to do, you'll be cursed. And, but he's doing it still. Yeah. And we talked a bit about afterwards, and he's like, yeah, the issue is, he says, I don't know how I'm going to support my family or this. And what's interesting is what I have observed, and so this is anecdotal, I don't have data on this, I don't think it's been particularly well studied. I just don't know if there's someone out there that's looked into it or where they'd even find the case studies for it necessarily. Yeah. But my anecdotal experience is pastors that have been open about the change of heart they've had towards tithing and just said, look, I've taught this my whole life, but I'm starting to think it's maybe not true. And let's look at these passages together and let's look at it and let's see what we think. Generally speaking, they will see a drop in their income. No question. Yeah. Almost immediately people start giving less. But what's interesting is long-term, their giving goes back to kind of normal, goes back to kind of the sustained kind of income of roughly about the same. Some of it increases, some is a bit less, but on the whole, it's not a big hit. Right. Now, pastors that for a long time don't teach what they believe and they realize this, and there's something going on there. I don't know what it is, but when they teach, there is this horrific drop-off. Or if people come to the conclusion themselves, well, we feel like our pastor's lying to us, or they're holding back from us, or they're not wanting to teach us. And there's a total different approach to how people respond. And I think, again, it's the long-term thing where the cognitive dissonance, it might be protecting you short-term, but actually long-term, the best thing for you to do is to be open to change, to tell people how you've changed and why. And
well, yeah, I mean, just even thinking really simply about the dissonance, that means, you know, in music too, that's like a strong term where it's just a little off, right? It's just not connecting. Right. There's just something interrupting those waves. And that's not a great way to live long-term, right? You can justify it short-term and live like that, but you're right. I can see that there being some significant long-term dissatisfaction in areas of life. So it is good to sort those things out. But I feel like, just that example you gave, that sounds like every church meeting we've almost ever been a part of. Think about what we do a lot of times, what over the past 10 years, we'll go to a church and let's pick on like Come Holy Spirit, like, like you say Come Holy Spirit a lot, but what if the Holy Spirit's here already now? And they go, wow, oh, good. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. But yeah, that makes total sense to me. This is great, guys. Thank you for teaching. Okay, thanks. All right, Phil, you can sit down here. All right, Come Holy Spirit. We just, Come Holy Spirit. And that's just what it goes back to.
That's what they pray. They'll even ask you, oh, Dan, could you sing this song, Come Holy Spirit? Or,
yeah. I love that thing you just said.
Yeah. What just happened?
Yeah, it's cognitive dissonance, confirmation bias, whatever. I mean, I hate it's getting a bit ridiculous just slapping a label like that on people. But a lot of those elements is what's happening, and we do it too, right? And that's the thing where it's like we got to watch out because we're also guilty of doing that. But a lot of churches we go to, it seems like that's been the anecdotal, evidence of what we've seen, right? Something along those lines.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think this is where, if we move into a more general look at Christianity, and I think maybe not totally broad Christianity, but at least Protestant Christianity. Protestant Christianity is built around what you intellectually believe. That is really what it ultimately boils down to, is do you intellectually believe this to be true? If so, you are saved. If so, you're a good Christian. If so, you'll go to heaven.
Right.
Whatever the ultimate reward. But generally speaking, it is can you intellectually agree with this argument or view?
Right.
That's basically the point of Protestant Christianity. Now, Orthodox, Coptic, Catholic, they might have a little bit more to say than that. Or even entirely different points to say to that. But generally speaking, that's where Protestantism is. And I think that's why I think it's a specifically interesting point for people that have that background within Protestantism, because you're pushed into cognitive dissonance quite a bit. Because generally speaking, if you have to agree with a certain way of thinking, that might work for like one point. That's like when we're talking about, that we've got a scale of things that like we can cope with being challenged, right? So like on most things, I'm like, yeah, sure, challenge that. That doesn't scare me too much, right? If someone's like, do you really think Jesus was born at 401 High Street, Bethlehem? Could he have been born at 404? You'd be like, yeah, sure, I don't care, right? But then if you go, well, do you really think Jesus existed? And then they're like, whoa, hold on, right? So like we've got this like level of like, do you really think Jesus was in Egypt for 2 years? Could he have been in for 2.5? I'm like, yeah, I don't really care. Okay, cool, whatever. Yeah. But do you really believe Jesus died? Whoa. And so we've got these spectrums. But on the whole, within a lot of Protestant Christianity, we have these kind of core fundamentals that are probably a lot broader than what most of Christianity historically held as core fundamentals. And so the problem is, the more that you make a fundamental, right? Oh, you have to believe this about the end times. Well, the end times are total mess, right? I mean, if we look through history, nobody's got any real clear idea what the heck they think about the end times, right? And so the people that were writing the flipping New Testament are going, dudes, he's going to be back any time. Don't even bother having kids, because he's going to be back any moment. So they clearly didn't really have any idea either on some level. And so like to have a fundamental belief. So what happens then is you start to read history and you go, oh, a lot of church history, they believed a different thing on my pastor.
Right.
What do I do? Suddenly you fall into cognitive dissonance, right? Yeah. And over what? Over a side point, over something that's not particularly the core message of the gospel, right? It's not about the divinity of Christ. It's not about, God becoming human, God valuing human, like it's not about that kind of stuff. God saving humanity from their trajectory of sin. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about some bizarre side element that isn't really as important.
That leads me, like we said, we were going to probably talk about deconstruction. That's like a huge topic. It's just out in the zeitgeist. It's a big thing that I feel like you and your community have been focused on lately, just because it is so relevant and it's important, right? But the thing I go back to with deconstruction is, say you deconstruct an aspect of faith, like you just were talking about, maybe not the biggest aspect.
Sure.
A lot of times, people are leaving the faith because they've deconstructed certain elements. But does that necessarily mean that Christ didn't die for, the salvation of the world? That God doesn't exist? So that's my, I'll kind of front load my thoughts on deconstruction. That's my concern with deconstruction, is there's a lot of people, asking the hard questions, deconstructing, thinking what they really believe. That's great. That's great. That's great. They leave the faith. Oh, I don't believe anything now. I'm agnostic. I'm atheist. I'm all faiths, whatever. And it's like, okay, so you deconstructed a few elements. Did you deconstruct the fact that God exists, or that, like I said, Christ is the savior of the world or whatever? Because that's a pretty big jump to go from I'm a Christian to I'm not. What happened in between those two things? And I think it's Brian Zahn. He's talked into deconstruction a bit. Have you?
Yeah.
You know Brian Zahn?
I know of him. Yeah, I've read a couple of his books in the past.
I haven't trafficked with him too much, but I mean, he said the point of deconstruction isn't to leave the faith; it's to increase your faith. Right? That's kind of how he landed on it. And I thought, that's probably a very simplistic, good kind of foundational way to view what deconstruction can be.
Yeah.
But
I think it's long-term, short-term. There's all sorts of different elements. But one thing I would say as well, so there's an interesting study I came across probably a couple of years ago now, but so it's a study of young Christians that go to university and how they respond in their faith. So it was looking at Christians that go to university or college, and then they looked at Christians that then left their faith versus Christians that stayed within Christianity. Okay, I don't know if I said that very well. I feel like I confusingly said, basically, some Christians went to university, some left their faith, some stayed. Now, what they looked at was what happens if we take a step back and look at them before they went to university, before they went to college. Did they attend a church that preached hard line that God created the universe in 6 days, X amount of 1,000 years ago? Now, to the degree that was severely taught, there was a great increase in the amount of Christians that were leaving their faith at university versus people that were part of communities of churches that didn't teach in a 6 day, a few thousand years ago creation. If they taught a bit more open, they were like, well, sure, you've something like, it could be millions of years. There's different ways to interpret 6 days. Maybe it's not even literal anyway, like it could be poetic, or, we can see how actually even something like evolution could fit into this framework somewhat as well. And so Christians that came from that background tended not to lose their faith. And so what I think it shows is that when we become rigid on points, and so we say the Bible is the ultimate truth and it's to be read at face value, and it says 6 days, so it has to be 6 days, and therefore when you go to university and you sit down and you start learning about scientific principles and how they operate and what a scientific method is, and we look at all the data and we go, okay, well, no one was there, okay, true, so can't observe it. Yeah, but you can observe all the fallout. You can observe all the fossil records. You can observe the age of the Earth by geology. We can observe that the universe is X amount of years old based on light and how far light has traveled. Oh, it's traveled this far. That means that must have started at this point. If we can figure out how far that light is away from us. And, so we start looking at that and we go, okay, there's enough evidence here that I'm pretty overwhelmingly convinced that it's not a 10,000-year-old Earth or whatever, right? So this is the conclusion of this 21-year-old kid, And they're left going, but my church says, if you don't believe that, you don't believe anything. That's been given to them. There's entire websites, you've got Answering Genesis and things like that, which their premise is if you don't believe the first few words of the Bible, you don't believe anything. And so it's almost handed to you to say, look, if you can't get to terms with this, then you should throw the whole thing out. And that's what people do. Now, absolutely. Of course, they would rather, on some level, most people that are within those communities would rather, no, actually, okay, if you don't believe that, we would rather you stay to some degree. Yeah. But, of course. But the problem is that has been communicated, and that is the way we think. And so we've been taught this thing of like, well, the Bible says, and that's why we believe. So why did Jesus die? Well, the Bible says. Why did Jesus come to earth? Well, the Bible says. And so the problem is, as soon as you start questioning maybe something in the Bible, well, the whole thing is, I have so many people comment on my stuff and say, well, Phil, if you're just throwing out that one Bible verse, which I'm not, I'm just saying, can we reinterpret it in a different way, or can we look at it from a context of history or something else? But they're saying, well, if you throw out that Bible verse, why should I trust anything else in the Bible? And I'm so fascinated by that. It's like saying, if someone lies to you in your life, you can't, everything they've ever said is a lie. No, probably not. Right. Now, some other things might not be true, and you might want to reevaluate some of those other things. And it's even more nuanced with the Bible, because it's not necessarily a lie. It's just you don't understand what the point of the story was, or it's been or what kind of writing it is. You don't even realize the amount of people that open up certain books of the Bible and don't realize, oh, this is a poem.
Right.
This is someone having a rant at God.
Yeah.
It might not contain the best theology, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes
Right.
when we're just screaming and shaking our fists in the air, if someone was to record that and say that's what God's like, you'd be like, oh crap,
Right.
stop. Oh no, you were listening to me? That's not good, right?
Right.
And so, but it's helpful. It's still very helpful, those passages, and it's meaningful, and it teaches a lot about what it means to be human and engage with God and how gracious and forgiving God is. But it's not specifically telling us we should believe that about God.
Right.
And so, but we need to have the nuance, like you say, of like looking at these passages from different angles. But I think a lot of Christianity has not taught us to do that very well.
I think about Scott Adams, who has kind of brought stuff like cognitive dissonance to light a bit in the past couple of years. I remember a story he told once where he went to church growing up, teenage years. I think he was like 15. He's at church. They're pretty literal church, so they're teaching the story of Jonah and the whale.
Right.
Jonah literally swallowed by the fish, literally was in the whale's stomach for 3 days, spit out, it's totally fine. And Scott Adams at a young age was like, okay, 3 days, no oxygen, stomach acid of the whale, the fish, whatever. He's like, I'm out. He went to tell his mom, he said, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. They literally said this happened. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't believe it. So I'm out. Because he had that cognitive dissonance where he's like, this is not working for me. It's too much. So I have to remedy this dissonance I'm feeling. Now, a Christian would probably have something to say about that. Well, it's a miracle. Absolutely. It was this, it was that. There are other conversations to be had. But for him in particular, he goes, that dissonance is not working in my 15-year-old brain. I'm just going to excuse myself, But if it's a church that teaches things, literally in a hard line without any room for questioning, which is the good part of deconstruction, that's problematic because you just go, no, that literally happened. Yep, 3 days, 3 nights, acid. Yep, okay, cool. Yep. You don't believe that? Oh, get out, or whatever. I mean, churches usually are not. That's a really extreme church, but mentally that could be how it feels. This is what we believe. If you don't believe that, you're not one of us. You're other. So
and that experience is very common. At least how people experience.
That's how they experience it, whether it's communicated
or whatever. Absolutely, and whether it's intended to be communicated. Even sometimes it's an intended thing, but
absolutely,
it is the way it works. If we all believe this and that person doesn't, we automatically kind of distance ourselves a bit. We don't want to hang out with them as much, or we don't like the way they talk or act or whatever.
And it's a tough place for pastors to be in. I'm not one, and because I wouldn't want to be in that position really, because you have to have beliefs, you have to have structure, you have to say, this is what we believe, and draw some harder lines than me or you would probably want to draw. And so I feel for them. I don't want this to come across like, we're picking on pastors that have beliefs and they say this is true, and if you don't like it, get out. Like, there is a point where you can't just be wishy-washy on everything, but maybe there is a balance where you're open to discussion,
Yeah, and the thing is as well, the thing that we forget is the pastors are the victims in this as well, in that generally speaking, it's not just the Bible says, therefore, whatever, but actually, generally speaking, it is the pastor is, therefore. And so actually, what a lot of people choose to leave church for, not necessarily their faith, but sometimes their faith entirely, but generally speaking, just the church, they can't deal with that mechanism, that community, they just step out. A lot of the time, it's because the pastor did something wrong, right? How many church splits have you heard of because the pastor had an affair, or the pastor stole some money from the offering, or whatever, and just everyone was like, well, screw this, and you're like, whoa, that's an extreme response to one guy making a mistake.
Right. Does that mean that Christ didn't die for the sin?
Again, right? So you go right back to the fundamentals and you go, well, actually, the Bible doesn't say anything about a pastor being flawless by any means. Right. There's nothing in there for that.
It probably says that they probably will be at some point. You'll probably come across that. Yeah.
At some point, your pastor's going to be a bit of a scumbag, because we're all scumbags at some point.
Right.
But like, it's so I think we need to remember actually the often, and again, this comes from years and years of traveling and speaking to hundreds of pastors, and as well as online, I now still speak to dozens and dozens of pastors every month. I'm speaking to so many pastors, and more often than not, they are victims of this system where they are expected to have all the answers. They are expected to live perfectly. They have no one they can be vulnerable with and go, I don't know what I believe about this. And this is why pastors generally these days are speaking to me. Back in the day, it was because we both believed the same thing and we're trying to bring that teaching to their church. These days, it's because I'm openly creating room for people to question and ask questions.
they're private messaging me, certainly not even on a public comment in case someone from their church would see it, but they're privately messaging me going, Phil, I am freaking out because I don't know what I believe about X or Y. And I know that just that one question is enough for the whole thing. The dominoes will start getting pushed and they'll all go down. And I am freaking out. And it's a horrible place.
Horrible. I mean, their livelihood, like literally their careers, their families, they're dependent on that for something,
and
you know?
Every one of their friends, 9 times out of 10, is within their church.
Right.
Almost.
I know.
I mean, or maybe they might have a few other friends outside the church, like that are just pastors of other churches. But again, God forbid they would tell them they have some doubts, because that's, again, like a whole system of like, what does this mean for my livelihood, for my faith, for my community, for my church?
Right.
What will people think? You know, and so it's a really terrifying thing to go through. And so this is what fascinates me is one of the ways that deconstruction is often painted is like, oh, you guys are just believing what you want to believe. You're just doing what you want to do. You're not like and they're almost framing it as though this is the easy choice, the easy option. But as we're talking about with cognitive dissonance and things like that, this is actually a really painful and hard thing to do. It's actually a lot easier to not ask the question.
You're right.
You know, the example of smoking cigarettes, right? It's a lot easier to just go, oh yeah, I'm just a bit anxious and I really need a cigarette. That's my answer to today's question of why do I need to smoke? If I sit there on my own with just that picture of like, you know, the person that's lung that's black and shriveled up, or, you know, like the picture of a tombstone or all sorts of crazy things. I saw one which had like a picture of like a fetus that was like black because the mother smoked. I mean, like horrible pictures. Horrible. Right? If you sit in a room on your own with no distractions, just sit and look at that picture, it's going to be hard to really engage with that and go, hi, I'd quite like to smoke, right? It's the person that does that. They've done the harder thing here than the person that goes, oh no, I just answer this away. And so actually it is the person that goes, actually, no, I'm really choosing to face some of these horrible passages in the Bible about genocide. And they go, I'm going to look at that and I'm going to deal with that. And I'm having to deal with the fact that my faith says that God is a bit of a moral monster on some level. They are actually doing the harder work that requires more like awful gut-wrenching work than the person that goes, oh, no, it's because we don't understand God's love, and it's just because they were really bad, and they just kind of move on. They don't spend too much time looking at it.
You know who's doing the really hard work here? I've said this before, but maybe not to you. We have like the History Channel here in America. I don't know. So and every once in a while you'll turn it on and be like, you know, facts of the Bible uncovered. These people are really, really, really doing the hard cognitive dissonance work. And this is a little side note, but it goes along with what we're saying. Like, they'll be like, you know, when Jesus walked on water, how did that actually happen? And then they'll go and they'll recreate the scene and they'll be like, actually, you know what probably happened was there was rocks placed, you know, every 3 feet in the water. He knew where the rocks were, you know, maybe even happening from rock to rock. And it made it the appearance of looking like he was walking on water. And then Peter didn't know where the rock was. He sunk and Jesus from the rock. So they go through this long thing. Like I've seen shows like this.
Amazing.
I'm not making this up. So
I know.
They'll go through miracles of the Bible and explain it that way. But this is actually a lot harder than just believing in miracles.
A lot more work.
Because you have to have a man named Jesus that was literally on the boat, that literally went out in the water, Peter was there, the disciples were there, there was eyewitnesses, they wrote about this stuff. So they're willing to give all of that, but they just can't believe in miracles and the divine. Mm-hmm. So they have to recreate this whole other story, which is a lot more extra work, I think, than just being like, why not just say it didn't happen? Be like, no, never happened.
No,
like,
everything happened.
Right? They're like, oh, the transfiguration. Well, actually, it was a lunar eclipse, and the moon hit just right, and there was this tree that looked like Moses standing here. So you can see how somebody might think there was other, like, don't put those people there. Say it didn't happen. It's okay. You don't. You know what I'm saying?
You would absolutely love. There's an author. He's British, but man, if you can't find his books, I'll try and find you one and bring it with me when I come.
Okay.
There's a guy called Adrian Plass, and he's like a comedian. He does like Christian stand-up, but he also like writes these books, and like they're like books full of like church flyers that he writes, and like they're little things that you're just like, oh, that's so funny.
I love it. I love it already.
But he had a whole book where it was like it basically explained that Jesus was raised as like as part of it. He left home when he was born, and he left home and became part of a circus, and he was in charge of the fish. And it basically explains like about 80% of his miracles using fish. So it's like why the fish has like a coin in its mouth.
Oh my
It's like how he
gosh.
walks on water is he's got all these fish that he's actually stepping on that he's trained. And
Oh, there you
it's,
go.
like, it's just constant, like how were all these fish never caught, but then suddenly all caught at once. And
Right.
like, he's got all this stuff, and it's like this guy writing this funny, and he's doing it for parody. But I've seen people like go, well, how can we come to terms with this? How can we figure this out? Like, and of course, there's a whole host of different ways, and probably on both ends of the spectrum, at the extreme ends of either spectrum, they're probably both quite ridiculous. If we're honest.
And yet, so there's the two major things we've been talking about this whole time going on there. There's cognitive dissonance. It doesn't make sense. They have to make sense of it. And two, they're preloading it with confirmation bias, which is what confirmation bias is. So
Absolutely.
I've seen this argument or debate go on a lot where somebody goes, explain to me how God exists. Well, this divine miracle. Well, no. I don't believe in that stuff. So somebody brings their confirmation bias of, I don't believe in miracles. Absolutely. I don't believe in the divine. You have to explain it to me without any of those elements. And it's like, well, explain to me Phil without his brain and his skin and his glasses. Yeah. It's not
absolutely. Phil. Well, it's like, it's again and again, we see this in like apologetics. People are like, oh, you must love apologetics because you love like putting forward different arguments. Like, I couldn't think of anything less interesting than apologetics. I don't know about you. and I'm sure some people love it, but like, I genuinely couldn't think of anything more mind-numbingly boring than watching two people at like polar opposite ends of a spectrum trying to argue that the other person believes what they believe when the fundamental core of why they believe it is different. So like one's going, you need to believe this because the Bible says it, to a scientist that goes, well, I don't give a crap about the Bible. And they're going, well, you need to care about this because of this observed fact based on this tree. And they're like, well, I don't really care about what your facts say. What does the Bible? And you just look at people just having this awkward, awful, boring argument. I couldn't care less.
I like when Todd Friel does it.
But I mean, that's funny though, isn't it?
That's
and that's maybe the only level that I'll engage with apologetics is maybe it can become a bit farcical and funny. But yeah. But no, but I think we do this all the time. And of course, like there's people watching you and I probably and how we interact or how we engage with truth and thoughts and go, oh my gosh, what an absolute idiot. They can't see their own bias or they can't see this or they can't see
Absolutely.
that. But generally speaking, what's needed more than anything is communication, is connection, and for people to ask questions of what people are going through. Mm-hmm. And so 9 times out of 10, like you said, I think you quoted Zahn saying, the purpose of deconstruction is to build your faith. Mm-hmm. Now, generally speaking, in my experience of talking with thousands of people that are going through this process, 9 times out of 10, the people that are going through this process aren't going through this process in a pursuit of losing their faith or in a pursuit of believing what they want to believe. Even what they're going through is they're going through a process of going, I genuinely don't believe one aspect here, 3 aspects there, whatever it is, and I don't know how to fit it in with my current.
Let me read. I have a excerpt from Zahn just so I don't misquote him. Let me read that instead, because what I was saying was more of a summary of what I was reading. Here's what he said, quote, "For the Christian, deconstruction is not an end in itself. Deconstruction alone is not a proper goal. We can't deconstruct forever. If all we ever do is deconstruct faith, eventually there will be nothing left. Just the discarded rubble from the relentless blows of a sledgehammer. The goal of reevaluating Christianity is authentic faith, not cynical unbelief."
Yeah, that's it. That's perfectly put. So the analogy I often give is with someone that has inherited a home, right? And so you're a realtor, so you might occasionally see homes like this. Hopefully not, but sometimes you inherit a home. And you go, this is great. It's my nan's home, and it was so great. I remember growing up in this home. And you get there, and you go in the house, and you're like, oh my god, I did not remember it being this bad. And the wallpaper is bad, and you're like, oh, wallpaper. Anyway, why are we using wallpaper? Let's peel that off and paint the room nice. And so you peel off the wallpaper, and you go, oh man, there's damp. It's got mold.
Yeah,
I need to knock this wall down and rebuild it, or you treat it and you realize it's too bad, so you have to knock the wall down, and you start doing that, and then you realize, oh gosh, these windows are 38 years old. I need some new triple glazing windows, really good, and I need to do this. And so you start working on the home, but then you realize, man, I'm doing so much. I've got a job. So you call in an expert at some point for them to actually start doing some stuff. They look at it and they go, dude, you have much bigger problems, right? You've got this problem and this problem. And you start just taking bits out and trying to replace them. Now, that works 9 times out of 10 with a home, I'm sure, you can just replace the windows, or you can just replace the doors, or paint here, or refloor a squeaky floorboard. But a lot of the time, it's not cosmetic. A lot of the time, you get the expert in and they go, dude, this has been badly set. The whole foundation is off. You've got like cracks in your foundation, and we're going to have to basically take the building down, reset the whole thing so you can build something new. And it's going to be great. The new thing will be amazing and it'll be perfect. And maybe they'll even be like, well, some insurance will cover some of it, or, don't panic too much or whatever. But this is going to have to happen. You stay at home, it's not going to work. You're not going to want to have a family in here because the roof might come in. And so in some cases, I guess it's a whole spectrum of like, oh, I've just got bad windows, I need to change a couple, right through to like, my foundation is crap, right? So some people's foundation, in my experience, my foundation wasn't Jesus, right? And the Bible's really clear on our foundation being Christ. And so my foundation was the Bible, though. And that's not necessarily the worst foundation, in the scale of things for a Christian, at least. But the problem is that the Bible is extremely subjective. I can make it say what I want, right? I mean, Todd Friel and me use the same Bible. So, if we use that as foundation, we'll have a very different experience in a different home. Whereas I think shifting to have Christ as a foundation. So basically for me, what I want to help people do in my experience, my heart, is to help people get rid of that wall or that roof, or rip up the carpet, or, I don't care. And you know what, if you get angry and you have to punch through one of the walls, or you enjoy getting the sledgehammer and taking one of them out, that's okay as well. Because honestly, some of this stuff is really crap and it makes me angry too sometimes. For sure. That's okay. Like, what I mean? It's okay to get your rage out on a wall. Like, no one's been harmed here, especially if that's come down. Right. But the goal isn't breaking the wall down. The goal isn't getting rid of windows. The goal isn't ripping up carpets. The goal is I want a floor to stand on. I want windows to keep the elements out so I can still look out. The goal is to replace that wall or create a bit for better open space. The goal is always to have the perfect home that I can live in, this place I can inhabit. The problem is, of course, some people have been handed such a terrible home that it needs change. It needs to come out. Maybe you inherited this home and you were abused and raped in this home when you were a child. And you think, you know what, let's just floor this totally to ground and rebuild something that's unrecognizable. Because I'm thankful for the 2 acres of land, but I do not want to walk into my old bedroom. Because that's just going to mess with my head. And there's people that have been raped by their pastors. Do you know what? It sickens me to the core. And I would never have thought of it 5 years ago, but I probably talk to people that have been raped by their pastor at least once a month. Wow. A new person, at least, and probably a lot more often. I'm being very conservative. And so I'm like, why the hell is this a thing? Like, this is not what I want to be experiencing. But I want to help people with that. But I'm like, so you know what? If you need to burn this thing to the ground to find something that can be built again, I'm okay with you burning it to the ground. I hear you. Don't go back to that church. You know what? Don't. If you need to never talk to that pastor again and go, you know what, I can't be a part of what they represent. I get it. Right. But the goal is always, how can we start building something? But at the same time, sometimes you have to move out and live in a caravan for a year because there's nothing else to live in, right? And sometimes you're in a tent for a while. Sometimes you have to live with your mate. Sometimes you don't have anything, right? And I think that's what a lot of people see the process and they judge that so quickly. So people that go, look, I don't know what I believe right now. For me, I'm like, oh, that's great. That's okay. That's a good thing even. It's okay to go through that and be completely open and honest about where you're at. Because that creates room for them to start growing and developing and start building. But when people go, I don't know where I'm at right now, and people point the finger and go, you heretic, you're not a Christian, you're a fake Christian, you never were a Christian, all these kind of weird accusations, you're backsliding. Like, often this isn't backsliding even. This is actually an intentional moving forwards of going, is this true, Jesus? No. All right, well, let's get rid of that wall. But when someone else loves that wall, they're not going to like that choice, They aren't, So it's a really complex. I know we just got lost in a metaphor there, but
I got so lost. There's a couple things I could say. One thing I'm thinking too is to view deconstruction as something that's necessary sometimes, especially like you just mentioned some extreme examples. Necessary, but with a goal in mind, hopefully of healing and growing, increasing the quality of your life, the quality of your belief structures. Look at it from a family point of view too. There's a lot of people that grow up with abusive family relationships. Maybe there's a dad that's abusive in various ways. So they obviously need to leave that environment for a time. They might have to go through counseling, therapy, probably, right? They should, to heal from that experience. Now, some people don't go through those steps and they're angry at their dad. They have dysfunctional families themselves. They just, the process just keeps repeating itself. Other people do heal and grow and can see the beauty in family. Even though their family was abusive, they can heal and say, well, that's not the way it should be. So I see the beauty in having a healthy family. I'm not going to do that to my kids. I'm going to have a healthy family dynamic. And that's kind of the beauty of that deconstruction that is redemptive, right? Just like in a church, if there's an abusive pastor, you can go, I'm leaving the church. Atheism is the way to go because churches are evil. It's like, well, I guess maybe that's your truth, but that might not necessarily be the truth. Maybe you just had a really crap experience and go through the steps of healing and growing from that and get back in an environment. That I don't want to say too much more than that because I don't want to make it too simplistic because I haven't experienced all of that, but that's kind of
no, of course, and we don't want to judge anyone that's going through any of those processes that looks different either. Like because the thing that I'm becoming more and more aware of is my journey is not your journey, and so the way I've been through deconstruction, I continue to deconstruct daily, and I'm constantly reconstructing as well. I've got to a place where I'm more reconstructing than deconstructing. I've got rid of most of it's very little of the old house left, so I'm mostly just building extensions. But as I build extensions, I find crap or whatever. I'm like, whoa, what is this? Let's get rid of that. But for the most part, I'm in a building phase of my life. And I don't know how much more I'll have to lose as I go. There will be some, I'm sure. There's always stuff lurking in our pasts and whatever. But some people have a very different experience, and some people are very different themselves and require different approaches to heal up, right? And so you just even in therapy, right? You go get therapy, and it's like, well, it might be CBT, it might be CAT, it might be ACT. There's 1,000 different models. It might be person centric, it might be this centric. And so in the same way of how do you grow and deal with these elements of faith? Well, ultimately, the only thing that's important to me is that you are on a healthy journey that protects you, that makes your health a priority in the process of trying to seek out spiritual truth. Now, I don't even care if you become a Muslim for 4 months or ever, even actually. If you became a Muslim in that process, I'd be like, you know what? If that's a journey that you have progressed and you've gone, no, I cannot believe in these truths. And actually, as a Muslim, I can fully engage and be a healthy, wholehearted human being who is connecting to what they consider to be the divine. It wouldn't be what I believe to be true necessarily, but actually if it's very healthy and helpful for them, I would go, well, this is clearly some sort of path for them to find healing and wholeness and goodness. And I don't know how much I would imagine God standing over them with a lightning bolt for moving in that direction. The reason I say that is like a lot of people in this process, very few become Muslim or something, typically don't go from Christianity to Islam, or vice versa, really, overly. But very often people become atheists or agnostic in this process. Now that's seen as deeply bad and terrible and backsliding, but actually often it's a step forward in that what we've had in our faith is so bad, we have to get rid of that, and we're left going, I don't know, or I don't believe it at all, I just can't. But just being honest with that and keep moving forwards, that creates room for something new to emerge. And actually what is new is almost completely unrecognizable. And I know for me and my faith, I've never had that process of becoming particularly agnostic or atheist. I think sometimes I can be agnostic as a whole, generally anyway, in my views of going, well, I don't know everything, so I don't know. But I've never completely lost my faith or anything like that. But I think people that have that's okay. It's an okay process because they haven't had something that's worth holding on to. And that's a good thing to recognize and come to terms with. If your faith that you were given, look at someone like the Westboro Baptist Church. If you grew up in that environment and you didn't go from that to atheism, I don't know if I would particularly be that impressed with your growth. I mean, well, hopefully you do, right? Because if your only concept of Christianity is that, whoa, do I want to burn that ship down? I'm like, I'm done. And then hopefully when you turn around and start moving forward, you go, oh, wow, there's beauty in the world. There's love, there's grace, there's kindness. Wow, I've met some other Christians and they're nothing like what that is. Oh, what's this then? And so, for me, I've known in my life that if I'm honest, the God that I worship today is the same God I've always worshipped, but is unrecognizable. And if I was to 20 years ago look at the God I worship today, I'd probably think it was some sort of heretical false god.
Right.
If I was honest, you know,
Right.
truly it's so different.
Right.
And so I think some people, it is such a black and white picture of God
Yeah.
and spirituality and faith and community and love and kindness. You know, that idea of family, if you come from an abusive family and you end up having this beautiful, loving, kind family, it's so black and white. You're almost like, these need different words.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, can I call you what you know, I don't even know what word to call it.
Right.
And so I think it's really common for people to go on these complex journeys, and it's not helpful for us to make them so black and white and simple by going, oh, that's just a backsliding person. It could be, you know, depending on what your concepts of backsliding are. It could be someone just going, oh, I don't know, you know, but generally it's a lot less of a passive, like, sliding away than a very intentional moving forward.
I guess I want, those are great points. I want to see what happens, because this is such a kind of a newer phenomenon of the past couple of years within this culture, within this generation of mass deconstruction, mass leaving the church, mass leaving the standard beliefs. We're just in a new age. So yeah, I think right now we're at a point where a lot of people are deconstructing. A lot of this age group especially is leaving their faith, but we don't know what's going to happen yet. They haven't come back in droves. So I think that's yet to be determined. So I'm intrigued as to what happens with that, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, you look at the stats are fascinating to me. So, because this is something I spend a lot of time researching. Right now, the largest growing movement of Christians in the US is they're called the nuns, the Christians that do not associate with
they church. Have like that white thing and the black
big habits.
Big habits.
No, so NONES, nuns. So it's basically saying, I do not associate with Christianity. I'm not a Methodist. I'm not a Baptist. I'm not a Orthodox. I am nothing. Right? I just love Jesus. Okay. Yep. Now that is the largest growing movement within Christianity, and of the 2,500 people that leave quote unquote Christianity every single week in America. Every single day, 2,500 Christians leave Christianity. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Of that amount, 79 of them still profess to love Jesus and follow Jesus. Mm-hmm. That's 4 out of 5 of those people. So of the 2,500 leaving every single day, 2,000 of them, roughly just a little bit less than that, 79%. Yeah. So probably, what's that, 1,850 or something, so let's say.
Sure.
But we could round it up to the 2,000. 4 out of 5 of them are saying, no, I'm still a Christian. I still love Jesus. I just don't want to be labeled that, or I don't want to be associated with that. Now, what's interesting is, like you said, we don't know what that looks like. What does a society look like where people aren't getting together and connecting in churches, where they're not parts of these types of communities? They might be parts of different types of communities. Maybe they're meeting in their homes. Maybe there's a lot of different ways that plays out.
Online,
Of course, online is a huge component, and we have no idea what that looks like, because that's a fascinating dynamic, because you've got globalism involved and all sorts of different things, and and we can argue a lot about the positives of that, but there's also the negatives of losing interaction on a personal level. That very little can replace a heartfelt hug and a shoulder to cry on, and laughs over the dinner table. Those are really huge things that you can't really replace easily. And so we don't know much of what that looks like, but what we do know is that for the most part, the people that are leaving the church in droves are not leaving Jesus. And so it's quite, in some ways, exciting to see what happens. But what's fascinating to me is, and this is where I'm wanting to collect data, and this is where I'm working hard to, I'm really working hard to try and create a bit of a base of developing data. And so I'm in the process of starting basically a mailing list of people that associate as Christian but do not attend church. And what I want to have is this mailing list, and every month I'm going to send out surveys, and I'll pick a topic. So I might send out a survey on the Bible and ask them how their views on the Bible have changed over the years. And the next month I might do a survey on the person of Christ. Who do they think that is? Do they believe in a virgin birth? Do they believe he's God? Do they, and over the years, I'm going to start developing more and more solid data that can be used by researchers. That researchers can go, look, let's look at these 79% and go, what is happening? What does impact? We could look at lifestyle. Do they give to charity? Do they get involved in food banks, or with the poor, the homeless, or do they do overseas kind of like relief work and things like that?
Do they murder and pillage?
Right, or do they just turn into psychopathic, murderous rapists? Who knows, right? We don't know the data yet because there isn't this set of data. And what's really struggling, I'm meeting with my best friend, Samuel, one of my closest friends. He's a researcher here in the UK, and he focuses on faith-based research. And I'm meeting with him to talk about how we can do more healthy, good research. And what's interesting is that strikes me is most of the research that's done on people leaving the church is they have a black and white line. People in the church are Christian. People that have left the church are not Christian. Yep. And so there's this huge 79% chunk that are just completely not really looked at with data that's helpful because they're associated as non-Christian.
Right.
And so it's like, well, no. What if we associate these as almost a third party? Can we look at what does that look like? Because it might be much worse. It might be much better. It might be somewhere in the middle. It might be actually better than being a Christian in a church. I don't know. We don't. But I think it's important. But the thing that for me, in the meantime, while we don't have the data, what's important to me is what happens to these 79% people that leave the church, and churches typically, when you leave the church, turn on you. They don't support you in that process.
Right.
I've been parts of churches where they supported me leaving, but I don't know how much of that was a thank God he's leaving. But no, genuinely, I've been a part of at least one where I was like, wow, that was a really healthy and helpful process.
Right.
But generally speaking, a lot of these people, they are leaving because of something, and the church is going, don't come back unless you change back to what you were.
Yeah.
That's the only kind of opportunity for you to come back, is to be what you were again. And very rarely do people change in that way, where we just flip flop between a new and an old position. So my fear is, while there's no data and the church isn't very supportive, is who's looking out for these people's spiritual well-being? Who's helping them be intentional about growing with spirituality? Who's telling them and validating, hey, your experience is valid? And actually, even though the pastors in your life and the people that you look up to as spiritual authorities all say you're backslidden, you're useless, you're rotten, you're not a Christian anymore, you're a non-Christian, who's out there saying, no, you love Jesus? That's wonderful. Let's figure that out. There's room for you to explore this. There's room for you to engage with this. And that for me is what my heart is to be that person. Because I could go into a church and actually be a pretty good pastor, I think. I mean, I don't know if I'd like it, and I'd probably screw up a lot of ways. But I could do that. I could be a part of a church, and I could love people, and I could help them with where they're at, and I could teach every week. And, I'd meet people up for coffee. I'd go to the hospital to visit for the sick and pray with them. I would probably enjoy that to some degree. But the thing is, there's 99% of people that are pursuing some sort of spiritual leadership role in their life are doing that. Mm-hmm. There's almost nobody going, I'm going to dedicate my life to trying to help people that have nobody and feel utterly kicked out of their church, betrayed, alone, or just don't know where to go and don't have any path. Like, there's people that are fulfilling those roles as kind of like online gurus, like people like Rob Bell or people like that who've got podcasts, and they're reaching out to the kind of people that are like, not Christians, but they're not really Christians, or they don't want to associate as Christians or with Christianity. And so there's people like that are amazing, wonderful. Both you and I have said in the past, we love Rob Bell. He's a fantastic communicator, really interesting guy. And so people like that are really important, but I think there's nowhere near enough of them. I mean, there's that too. So to play another side of that as well, because I'm tracking with you for sure. But so the danger, the fear, whatever word you want to put, is that there'll just be this populace of all these thousands and thousands of people that are in that kind of state of limbo. They're outside the church, but still want to engage with the faith community or their faith system. But the deconstructed community, I don't want to pick on anybody in particular. If that platform is primarily just tearing down the church, tearing down the structures, tearing down belief, it's mostly predominantly tearing down or poking fun at, or can you believe I used to believe this? Oh, what a bunch of hypocrites, they have no idea what they're talking about. I'm so liberated now that I'm kind of in this new place. If it's mostly negative, it's not going to be a very profitable experience for many people, I think. So I think, like you're saying, there needs to be this other, because let's face it, the church, Christianity has an image problem, I think, in a lot of ways. It's just not viewed as a place where millennials, Gen X, Z, whatever is after millennials. We're running out of letters.
Yeah, whatever X, Y, and Z is after millennials. They're not going to church. Okay, let's just even say that's their bad. You know, church is perfect, but they're just not coming. They're still not coming. And the church has to engage with that or wrestle with that or not. And, you know, they're just not going to church. So what's going to happen with that populace when all they're seeing is people that have left the church and are disgruntled with the church and kind of poking fun at it? And the church just does have a bad image within that cultural, you know, that subculture where, because I do listen to a lot of podcasts with people in that place, and they'll view something from Hinduism or Buddhism or atheism, Gnosticism, Judaism as kind of like this beautiful thing, because it's not something they've really interacted with a lot. And it just kind of seems like grass is greener on the other side. And, oh, this yogi said this great statement. It could be like one word off from something that's in the Bible, but it's so refreshing and new and beautiful because it's not that thing that they don't like anymore. And that's kind of something I've been wrestling with too, is like, I'll hear these people like come out of the church and go, oh man, this atheist said the other day, you know, God is just love. And I was just blown away because it was so deep and blah, blah. I'm like, oh, just like, that's Christianity. You're just mad at Christianity right now. So you have a bad taste in your mouth from it. So I'm not saying that that's all that these people are experiencing is just a bad taste from Christianity and all that. But there is a lot of that going on too that, you know, I think we need to be mindful of, right?
And I think there needs to be an awareness of how different people are going to respond to that. So of course, that's a big factor. I mean, you're looking at a people group that, largely speaking, you know, when you
can I just say one more thing on that too? I feel like, you know, we view like a lot of those other people as cool, and just like a church pastor just doesn't have that. That's what I said. There's an image problem. They're just not cool in this culture for whatever reason. Again, it might not be the pastor's fault. It might be to some degree where it's not like my pastor said this statement, you know, or I just heard Joel Osteen say this thing, man, like that's deep. But if you say like a yogi said this, or, you know, this Franciscan monk said this, it's just, there's something cool because it's not what we're used to. Sorry.
Oh, and I experience this all the time, you know, so when I would go around and preach, you know, I'd say something and people would be like, wow, it's amazing. This guest speaker said this. And I'd look at the pastor. I know that he said it 100 times. And he's probably thinking, for feck's sake, I've said that 100 times and you're listening to this guy. So we do this all the time. We pick, you know, and this like you, Joel Osteen, right? Oh, I saw Joel Osteen on whatever news channel he's on, or TV, you know, whatever. Yeah. I saw him and he said this and that's amazing. And the pastor's probably thinking like, I just did a 4-week series on that topic, you idiot. Like, were you not listening? Right. But it's like we all have different people that we're going to be more open to or less open to by default, you know, for a whole host of different reasons.
Sure.
So the thing that I would say that is there's dozens of things I could probably talk about that in that area because it's so fascinating. But we have to recognize as well that a lot of people can only receive a message through the person that they can, right? So at the end of the day, I'm happy if I've told you 10 times, look, you're not a filthy, rotten sinner. God loves you. You know, you're wonderful. You're amazing. You're made in His image, and you haven't got it. And then you listen to Joseph Prince, or you know, you listen to a yogi, or you go and listen to someone else, and they say that, and you get it. Of course, I'm a little bit like, and they're like, but I'm also going, yes, they've got it.
It's the package they can receive in. Yeah.
And so I'm like, actually, you know what? That's wonderful that you finally clicked. And it was, whether it's the way I articulated it, whether you think I'm just a bit of a dick and you don't like me or whatever it is, right? There's a whole host of different reasons it could be why you didn't hear that and you heard it from a different thing. At the end of the day, what I'm really excited about is that you heard it. And so I think for me, I want to keep that at the forefront. So for a lot of people, you give the example of, you know, well, God is love, you know, and an atheist says that, and they're like, oh, I love it. And you're like, yeah, you do. But yeah, your pastor said that for years, but he's also got up and said at the sermon, and he killed all the Canaanites. And as a reward, he said, well, actually kill the Canaanites, but don't kill the young virgin women. You can keep them and divvy them up amongst the soldiers. I'm not saying for sex. There's a reason they're the young slaves, the young female virgins. Now, you know, there's a reason I'm not saying keep the old woman, you know, like, or the old men. Like, you've got passages like that getting read from the sermon that make me go, well, yeah, my pastor's been saying God is love, but in this package, there's a lot of other components that kind of made it a bit confusing, and I couldn't fully understand that. Right. And then I go into a different part of the world, and I go, oh, there's God is love, and that person's saying God is love, and that person. maybe God just is love, and we got that part right, but we've got a whole bunch of other bits maybe not so right. And I'm
Right.
like, well, that's good, that's great, that's okay. The thing I would say though, and this is a bit of a side point, but it was going back to what you're saying of like, the problem that you have is people are angry, people are upset, people are scared. You know, when you've believed something for 20 years and you find out it's wrong, for whatever it is, right? There's this thing of like, oh, I've just wasted all this time.
Yeah, we don't like that.
Or we think, how dare this person lie to me? Very rarely are people intentionally lying to you. Maybe occasionally, you know, some like money grabbing TV preacher or something could be, but generally speaking, Pastor Bob of his like local church, who's just trying to help you and just trying to get by and praying for people in the hospital, visiting people who are like, you know, struggling in their marriage and helping them. He's just trying to help people. And if he tells you that tithing is biblical, it's not because he's trying to deceive you. It's probably just because his pastor told him tithing was biblical.
Right.
And he went to Bible seminary and they taught tithing was biblical. And so he's just kind of doing his thing because actually he cares day in, day out about helping people. And he's not sitting there studying the Bible all day. So it's, you know, people aren't necessarily malicious, but it's easy for us to think, oh, screw this person. I trusted this person to do this and they didn't do it. Right? I trusted this person to be the teacher of truth. And they were out there busy helping people in hospital beds. And they didn't actually learn the truth and teach me it. And now I found the truth for myself. I'm blaming them. That's a very natural response. It's not the right response. It's not maybe the healthiest response, but it's quite a common response.
And but it's so layered too, because it goes back to what you were saying earlier, where the pastor typically, you know, 99 out of 100 times has to say, I do know the truth. You know, they don't say it in quote unquote, but that's the stance, the position.
Thus saith the Lord.
Yeah, God says. And if you say, you know, well, what do you think about this? Is this true or is this true? They'll go, this is true. You know, they're not usually, well, I don't know. That'd be more of maybe a rabbinical way of doing it. Well, I don't know. Let's think about this. Let's discuss those.
Let me ask you a question, and then you have to think about it, or you know, like,
which again maybe is why, you know, from afar we go, oh man, a rabbi, that's cool. You know, the pastor just says it's this way, and we don't like to be told it's this way. But then again, if we don't
like it when the pastor asks a question either, though. Because we kind of want him to tell us the answer, right?
But we like that
it's
too.
Like this yin-yang equation, isn't it? Like, it's like, I want you to tell me what's true, but I also want you to be like open and I don't know. I'm not sure. Why don't you think about it? But don't you dare do that because I need to know. Like,
but if we
I want to think about it.
If we were in the Judaical community and we grew up with rabbis, we might be saying, well, look at that pastor. He actually knows. So we'd be having maybe an opposite stance. He knows the truth. I asked my rabbi, what car should I buy? He goes, I don't know. What car shouldn't you buy? It's like, I don't like that anymore. So there's really just what you're involved in maybe is something you wrestle with, right?
Yeah. But and so I think that this is all very natural and normal, and I don't want to demonize it. I think there's better ways to approach that and better ways to deal with that. And I think at times there's no other way people can approach it. That's just where they're at, what they've got. And over time they might soften, or they might change their approach, or they might learn something different. And other times they may not. And that's kind of a bummer sometimes. Like some people get stuck in whatever bits and pieces, maybe some anger, some resentment, some bitterness, and that is what it is.
Maybe isn't that like predominantly where people get stuck in their belief system, their attitude system? Like me and you were like overthinkers, maybe to a fault. Probably. I don't know. I don't think so.
I'm definitely.
I don't think I am. Let me think about this. But it's like I would say maybe a lot of people aren't like that. Because maybe I just traffic with people more like you and other people that are thinkers, because that's what I'm like. So I think that everybody thinks because all I'm doing is thinking. But do you think maybe a lot of people don't?
I think so.
I just said think like 100 times.
So many times.
People are like, this guy is not a thinker.
No, this guy doesn't even know a different word for think. You know? No, I think I often am very, very aware that my capacity to intellectually reason holds me back from a lot of spirituality and a lot of growth.
Right.
But it's also an incredible positive, and it helps me, it helps others as well. So, you know, there's a double edge to the sword.
Yeah.
But I think what's fascinating about this is while these people are in pain and suffering, often the only time you're going to reach them is by validating that pain, validating that suffering, highlighting the injustice that they've been through. You know, to say, well, you know, that you've experienced that, but that's not really important. You know, that's not really what the church is like. It doesn't really help them. You know, that's not what they need right now. They need someone to validate them, because that's what they've heard from their church as well. Pastor might be like, well, yeah, you know, you might have heard that, but that's not, you know, and that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for some validation of maybe some doubt is okay. Asking questions is okay. And so I found this because I don't want to piss off people that are in church and very happy and content with where they're at and what they believe.
Right.
So I don't want to piss those people off particularly.
Even though too late, we already have.
Oh,
how many conversations? How many conversations have we had with people that like are getting mad at us really because of like what we believe when we're, and the funny thing is we don't even like, we're not even like holding.
No, half the time we were just throwing out an idea.
Yeah, like, oh, I think this might be true. And they're like, how dare you? How could you possibly believe in that? I'm like, well, actually, yeah, maybe I don't. But like, it's too late for them. They're already like fighting with us. It's so entertaining.
So no one's heart is to hurt those people necessarily.
Right.
Maybe some people that are right in the midst of their hurt, their heart is to hurt that person. You know, maybe someone that has been through some sort of abuse from their church, whether I'm not necessarily talking about sexual abuse or anything. That's it's not widespread, but it is widespread, you know. But emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, some horrific stuff that can be done in church. You know, some people that are being like in that experience, they actually do want to hurt that pastor. They do want to suffer, or that church to suffer. So there are people like that for sure. But 9 times out of 10, no one really cares about the church suffering or not. It's just like, well, I'm just moved on. But I do need to express myself. I need to express the pain. I need to express what I hold to be true. I need to point out things that I don't see as true. And so for me, what's interesting is I live with this tension, because a lot of the people I reach are still very much in churches, but a huge proportion, and a very much the growing proportion, are people that are coming out of church and don't know where to go next. And actually, one of the main ways to reach them, is to give them like a pointer in the future. You know, that here's the way you can start building your new home. But actually, one of the ways to reach them as well is to show them how to deconstruct. To look at this belief. It's not true. Like let's have a laugh about it. So humor is a huge part of what I do. You know, my memes are I'm joking about bad beliefs. I'm also creating opportunity for new belief. I point that out a lot. But I do spend a lot of time joking about bad beliefs. And I try to do, when I point out bad beliefs, I try and do it in a funny way because it's softer.
Yeah, you know what's great about your memes? Because I love humor. That's primarily like what I love thinking about talking about with you anyways. It's just having a good time, having a laugh. But your memes are funny. That you got to read the comment below, because you're going to say something that's really going to poke at a belief or just an amusing something. And it's always funny. You got to read the comment, because you're going to really... hash it out. You're going to flesh it out in that comment, which is awesome. So I love those.
No, that's always my goal. But the thing is, you do that, people are going to be upset. You know, the person
I know.
Sitting in church, and, you know, it's a pastor or just someone that's at church and just likes that belief, or doesn't, well, why are you pointing fun about church? You know, I post a meme about, you know, like, how do we get young people in the church? And people are like, well, let's have a bigger pizza budget, or let's do this. And then you got the guy going, maybe we could let them ask some questions, and he gets thrown out the window or something, you know? That's a good meme, by the way. I might make that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
But, you know, I might share something like that. And someone in the church might be like, well, you know, what are you saying? We don't ask questions? You know, they get really upset about it. And that's not my intention wasn't to do that necessarily. Right. So, you know, maybe my hope is that someone that's in that place might think, oh, would that work? Is that a good idea? You know, are we opposed to that? But that's not really my audience. My audience, when I make that particular meme, is someone that did get chucked out the window for suggesting could be asked. Or maybe there's someone that was fool enough to ask the actual question. Not even just suggest we could ask questions, but he actually asked one. And he is gone. And yet he's going to look at it and go, oh, someone gets me. Someone gets it. Because the thing is as well, and this is something that we don't look at about deconstruction, and I don't think people realize, is that this group of Christians are the most lonely group of Christians of all of Christianity. If you're a Baptist,
except for the Unitarians,
you're a Baptist. At least if you're a Unitarian, where do you go on Sunday?
I don't know.
Unitarian church.
Oh, there you go.
So at least you know where to go, right? And then you go, oh, you too? Okay, cool. Well, like, you know, like you do you, but like we'll do us separately together. You know, it's like at least there's some level of community here. But
I just think Unitarian sounds like the most lonely people.
Oh, it's amazing.
Unitarian. Anyways, keep going. So, but you're right. This is the most lonely group because they have no community.
I can't do church anymore. Well, where do people who can't do church anymore go and hang out with other people that can't do church? You find each other online, but you don't really have that level of relationship. It's not a real, and so what you find is this is a huge growing community. I mean, massive. The data is saying that more and more people that are leaving church actually never left Jesus. So what you don't know is you sit there thinking, I am the only person in the world that feels like this. I am the only person that's asked questions and been kicked out of the community. and you don't have any idea where, or oh no, well, there's a group of Facebook of 3,000 people, but they're all in London, Nicaragua, and Sydney, and I'm in, you know, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You know,
nice, good poll, good poll. You got it. Yeah.
I was like, wait, where is Milwaukee? As soon as I said it, got it. I went too obscure. Sorry if you're from Milwaukee.
Yeah,
not obscure. You're a major, important, vital part of this world.
But Jim in Milwaukee is like, I'm turning this off right now.
Screw this guy. But you know, you're sitting there and you go, well, where are these? You know, you ask on the group, is there anyone in here from Milwaukee? And nobody replies. You know, no one. Oh, well, I'm from New York, and you're like, that's not that close, right? You know, that just feels utterly alone. What you don't know is you've got a street with 100 houses on it. You could have 20 people on that street that have left church, been booted out of church, been rejected by church, you know, become a seeking agnostic that still loves Jesus but doesn't know what to do. You know, all these different frameworks. Or there might even be a home group of some people that are actually even started. They found a couple of people and they meet together. They might live 3 doors down. You would never know, largely because we never talk to our neighbors, right? But like you just don't know. And actually, if this is the largest growing movement in Christianity, I can guarantee there are people in your city that believe like this. The question is, how do we get them to connect? How do we get them? But the point being that this is a lonely, lonely group. And for them to see a meme pop up on Facebook or Instagram and go, this person gets me. For them to be able to send me a message and say, hey, this is my experience. And I can say, hey, I talk to hundreds of people like you every day. You are not alone. I'm so sorry this happened to you.
Yeah.
This is not okay. If you ever need to talk to someone, I'm here. And they can say, is there like, what does this mean? Do I just pack it in with Christianity? I'm like, that is an option, but you don't have to. You don't have to. Because that's maybe the first time they've heard you don't have to.
Right.
That's maybe the first time they've heard there's hundreds of people like you. Yeah. That's maybe the first time they've heard someone say, hey, I'm actually here to talk to you and listen. And I'm not here to preach to you or to tell you to go back or what to do going forwards. I'm just here to listen and help you. These people have never had that. And this is an epidemic because, and I think this is the only interaction I really care about having with people that are in church today is to try and help them see what's happening and try and change their posture to people leaving so that they're not pushing and not pointing, saying you're backsliding, you know, don't bother coming back until you change. But instead they're saying, hey, would you go for coffee with me and explain your journey and talk to me about what happened? And I'm not going to try and change your opinion. I just want to learn. I want to hear. Because what they'll find is 9 times out of 10, that person goes, oh yeah, I still believe in Jesus. I still believe he's coming back. I still believe in the Holy Spirit. I still believe in prayer. I pray with Jesus. I love Jesus. And I would love to meet up with other Christians and talk about Jesus. I would love reading my Bible. But I just don't like that tithing thing, or I don't like the end times. That
structure,
or I can't conceive of the miracle part. Well, that's fine. Like, you know, at the end of the day, you don't necessarily, apart from maybe a resurrection, there's not naturally that actual component where you have to believe in any miracles, right? That's not in any of the early creeds. None of the creeds say, by the way, you have to believe that the coin came out of the fish's mouth, or you have to believe that leper got healed. You don't have to believe that. Or
you can show them, hey, there's this guy out there that writes that there's fish under Jesus's feet. Boom, that you know he was a circus
or it's the
farmer.
Rocks, or it's that was Moses, the tree, the moon tree. But that's at the end of the day, I don't care if that's where someone's at. I'm like, oh, it's great. You frame this however you need to frame to help you continue to connect with God. You don't call it God, you call it the divine. That's awesome. I don't care. I mean, he's not called God anywhere in the Bible, right? Nowhere in the Bible is he called God, because that's an English word that we've made up thousands of years later, right? So, and in the Bible, there's not even one word for him. It's like about 28 words every other page, you know, and half of them are borrowed from other languages and other gods. Like, it's like, this thing's a mess. Like, don't worry about calling him God. Calling him Jesus. Well, I don't call him Jesus. I don't care. That guy's called Joshua. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? Like, why are we calling him? We should be more upset that we're calling him Jesus if we're going to be obsessed with a name, you know? And so
even God wasn't concerned. Moses is like, what's your name? He's like, I am.
Yeah.
I am. Yeah. Not too caught up in that whole thing.
No.
Kind of having fun with it. Yeah, I am.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but I do think there's a lot of concerns with. I think the healing needs to come between the two emerging groups that are people within institutional Christianity, people within institutional movements, denominations, churches, and people that are leaving. There needs to be more healthy communication between those two groups.
For sure. So there we go. That's a great point on that. going back to the church has an image problem, to also go back to the confirmation bias and the cognitive dissonance, right? We're kind of tying that in. I'm somebody that still is in the church community. And so for people that are, there is probably a lot of that cognitive dissonance going on, where maybe you can read the stats or visually see the scenario where a lot of people are leaving the church, and yet you're justifying, well, it's because they're backsliding. They never really believed. Maybe, there's something wrong with them. We have to keep doing what we're doing. So there's where the confirmation bias can play into it and go, no, we're right because we figured this out. I've read the Bible. I've read all these other books. My spiritual leaders have told me that I'm right. So I have this bias going in my favor, and I have this dissonance going where other people aren't seeing it. They're leaving. They're having problems, but I don't know if I'm going to change. And where you're going, maybe if we're aware that this is going on, people are struggling, people are leaving, people are deconstructing. If we can shed some of that cognitive dissonance or confirmation bias, we can be a better bridge to help those people.
Yeah. Well, I worked with a group of leaders of a local church, localish, but worked with them as in sat down and talked to them, face to face. So that makes a lot of difference. Even over Skype or something, it can feel quite impersonal at times and doesn't feel quite as connected. But a lot of the leaders I talk with, I'm like texting on Instagram, never mind Skyping or, like actually sitting down over a coffee. But I went and visited with these leaders every now and again, a few times a year, probably over several years now, about 3.5, 4 years. And they had this just mass exodus, mostly young adults constantly leaving church, even their youth starting to leave church. And their church is just slowly aging, right? It's not growing, but it's getting older and older by the day.
But that's every church almost, right?
A huge amount. And maybe not the mega churches or the super cool hit churches. And then we start to think, maybe if I have to become a super hit church, that will do it, right? So then we've got like churches of 40 people trying to bring in smoke machines and, dress their, the 72-year-old pastor in skinny jeans or, whatever it is. But they're trying and they really care. They do care. They're genuine. The fact they're doing certain things, they're creating a coffee shop, because really, that's why people come to church, because there's no good coffee in the world, and we just come to church for the good coffee on a Sunday, right? Of course not. Now, having a good coffee shop in your church, if you do that, go for it. You do it. That's awesome. Brilliant. But that's not why people are coming. Like, let's kid ourselves, right? And there's a lot of cool, hip, great coffee shops in your town that beat your church coffee shop, hands down, regardless of how good it is. I guarantee it. Even if you're in backwater Milwaukee.
Even Milwaukee.
I'm going to get comments on this. I'm going to go all in on the Milwaukee thing. I want it to become like a meme,
Phil hates Milwaukee.
It's going to be like,
that's not
Phil
funny.
Has never come to Milwaukee because
he's never allowed to.
If you're in Milwaukee and you want me to come and hang out, I would love to. But
Too late.
I don't like coffee, so that's why.
They're all about beer. That's like the beer capital. That's
okay, of course. So, but the thing is, right? So that's we're the clear evidence of us starting coffee shops and starting this and trying to dress cooler and try and have bigger music or better. We're clearly thinking, what do young people want? How do we keep them here? Now, I posted a meme just a couple of days, probably a week ago, about it was a response of why young people say they left the church. And there was about 8 different reasons that were the biggest reasons. And they were, this is from groups of thousands and thousands of people. It's not like a little survey done from one little church and they can go, that church sucks at this. No, this is across every denomination in the UK, across thousands of people. And so this is UK data, so it's slightly different from the America. It's UK data. No, data. How do we say it here? I don't even know. But this is from the UK, and it's showing very clearly young people saying we weren't allowed to ask questions. Sexuality was too strongly preached on and told that we couldn't be this or couldn't be that. There was this, there was that. Now you can go, well, tough luck, that's the way it is. That is an option, of course, and that's some people's response. But other people's response is to genuinely go, I don't understand why young people are leaving. They're just leaving, and we don't know. And I'm like, you realize the stats is here, right? You realize young people are telling you why they're leaving. You're just not listening.
Right.
And so this group that I've been working with over about 3.5, 4 years, I was working with them and they're constantly asking, I'm saying, look, I would try this. I would try opening up maybe one service a month. Why don't you have a Q&A? Or why don't you have a discussion as a group instead of a sermon? Why doesn't the pastor do a 5-minute sermon and then just read a passage and maybe talk about it for a minute or two and then just open up a discussion? And everyone in the church can just chat about it. You could break up around small tables, or if your church is small enough that this church is quite a small church, you could just sit in a big circle and talk about it. Now, they did experiment with that, and they didn't like it. They didn't like that there was different opinions, and people didn't like there was different views. They just wanted one person up front telling you. They wanted the pastor to tell them what to do and believe. Anyway, it came to a point. It was quite a while ago now, actually, but the pastor and the leadership team sat down with me, and they were saying, "Look, this is the first time they acknowledged that young people were leaving because of some of these points. They would try certain things, but they wouldn't acknowledge. They were like, oh, we just don't know. We could try some of these things, but we don't know why young people are leaving. Now, I talked to a lot of the young people that were leaving in their community. In fact, one of the reasons they first got in touch with me was because they knew young people in their community that had left were in touch with me. And they were sharing things from me or whatever. And so it was the first time, and it was about a year ago or so now, and the pastor and the leader sat down and said, Phil, they're like, we've come to the conclusion that what you're saying is right. Young people are leaving because we are not open to asking questions. We have quite a rigid belief.
Right.
But we just believe that's what we should have. And so if that means young people aren't going to be there, that's what it means. I'm sure God will bring the right young people to us. And that was it. Okay. And we've not really talked since. A little bit of interaction online. And I was like, you know what? That's great. If that's where you're at, you do you. But, and this is what I loved about it. This is the only thing that really I took away from it is, you finally are not going to say, we don't know why there's no young people. They know why. They're just willing to go, no, we're just not going to compromise here. And this is one option of cognitive dissonance, isn't there? There's one option where you go, okay, we do know it, and we're going to just choose not to.
They've cleared up that dissonance, and they've gone in that direction. Yeah.
And they've just gone, no, we're just going to rule out this option as being a thing. Now, you can say what you like. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, oh, this is really unfortunate. I hope I've been vague enough that no one will figure out, there's a lot of churches around me in the local kind of 150 miles or whatever. It's not that local. So, but in my opinion, that church, unless it changes, will be dead in 20 years.
Right.
Because unless some sort of massive cultural shift happens, and people are looking for that like black and white certainty suddenly. I think that's a lot less common in this day and age than it was 20, 30 years ago. I don't think young people are looking for black and white certainty nearly as much as they're looking for a place to explore ideas and engage with ideas. That's my opinion from what
we talked about this last time. There was an article written in 2008 that said in 10 years, we're going to see the absolute collapsing of evangelical mainline Christianity. Right. And this wasn't, I think it was written in a Christian-ish journal or magazine or something like that. But this guy was saying, look, at this next generation isn't going to be all for the typical mainline evangelical church. That model is going to collapse. And now 11 years later, I'm like, boy, was that person right. I think last podcast, we might've hit on it briefly, but it's like, there was a lot of foresight there to this generation not being cool with this structure. Again, is that the young people's bad, the church is bad? Let's just say nobody's or both. I don't want to put blame on anybody.
Probably blame across the board on this, but it's also maybe just natural growth.
It is. Who cares? It's it is, right? That's what we're faced with. So you can ignore it if you want, but it is. So either churches are going to die out because they're just all older, and then no more, or they're going to change and maybe something new will form, which actually that's probably sounds like the best solution, right? Something new is going to come out of this.
Constantly.
Yeah. So I'm really interested to see what happens. What happens with this group of people that are in that place of deconstructive questioning, no church right now, no community right now, or maybe an online community. Where do we go from here? Is it more online, more communal based? Like, I'm intrigued. What's the next 10 years?
And this is what Christianity has done historically. You look at the early church, you've got all the Jews that were saved by Jesus, these disciples, and they were going out into the nations and saving everyone, but they didn't, right? They basically all stayed in their little Jewish hubs. So there was a Jewish community in Rome and a Jewish community in Corinth, but they were just the Jews that gathered in the Jewish groups, right? And they were very like Puritan, and they were very separate, and because that was the Jewish way. And it took someone like Paul coming along and going, oh yeah, you don't have to do any of the Jewish stuff. You're a pagan, you do you. But like, maybe don't have orgies, maybe don't do this. But like, generally speaking, no, cool, come on in, Right. He's going into communities and going, oh, you say that there's an unknown God that you all already worship, but there's no real parameters apart from the fact that he's in everything and it makes everything exist. That's Jesus. Let's do that. Let's worship that one. Get rid of all the other gods and just focus on that. Like, he's like co-opting someone else's faith to just make it acceptable. Right? And this is what we did throughout history. We do this with our religious festivals, right? Easter, pagan festival. Christianity, pagan festival. But we just rock up and we're like, oh, you're doing this? Why don't we just say that's about Jesus?
Yeah.
Right. problem solved. Because right, this is basically what Christianity is about. Or Christmas is about. Pagan cultures wouldn't let go of this one big festival, so Christians were like, "Well, what about if you could be a Christian and do the pagan festival still?"
Right.
No. Yeah. What are there like little like gray like terms and conditions? Only term and condition. You make it about Jesus instead of this God, and instead of that God, you do this, and we focus on some stables.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Do we still get presents? We still get to put a tree up. We still get to put stuff around the tree. Yeah. Fine.
Right.
Trees are great. I love trees. God made trees. Awesome. Let's do it. Christianity. Woo! Right.
Right.
And so the thing is that the church needs to be remembering, and this is where I actually don't see. So a lot of people within the evangelical community like label this emerging deconstructing movement as the emerging church or the progressive church. Now, I think that pockets of deconstruction community are emerging in progressive church, like kind of Brian McLaren kind of like people. But I don't actually think that's quite common, and I don't think that works for a lot of people. In fact, I actually think the progressive church is much like the evangelical church on the whole, more so than either one want to admit. That's my little tidbit. But I do think that the terms progressive are quite fascinating to me, because in many ways, the evangelical church is intentionally a regressive movement. It's a movement that fights against any movement forwards, and it's constantly looking in the past and going, that's what we want.
Right.
We used to do this. We used to have this family value. We used to have this way of doing church. We used to have this type of worship. We used to have this type of, and they're constantly just going, how do we rein this back in? How do we bring this back to where it was in the past? But actually, that's never how Christianity works. Christianity was always marching forward, going, there's a new people group. How do we make Jesus work in that context? Oh, you already worship a God who died? Okay, well, let's just call that Jesus. And then we'll tell you, we resurrected. And and it's crazy the things that actually we used to do in study how Christianity spread throughout the world. And I think we need to be more excited and open about, there's people moving in this direction. How do we frame the core messages? I'm not saying compromise. I'm not saying, let's just rewrite the Quran with the word Jesus every time it mentions Allah. No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, can you go into a Middle Eastern context and go, you already worship a God, and it's the God of Abraham, and you believe in a prophet Jesus. Okay, well, can I help you see different aspects of Jesus that might make you realize, wow, he was quite divine. He's divine on earth. Wow. And can I help you see that actually there's parts in your Quran that actually say, like you were saying, the atheist says what the Christians are already saying, or there's parts of your Quran that are saying basically the same thing as Christianity. I mean, on the whole, a lot of this stuff is pretty similar. And you could do that with most world religions, Buddhism, Hinduism. A lot of it is saying the same thing, right? The golden rule is pretty much in all of them. And actually, most of them said it before Jesus. I think we really need to be getting excited about the opportunity rather than grumbling and figuring out, how do we pull these guys backwards?
Right.
How do we bring the message forward with them?
Right.
Because they're moving forward, whether we like it or not. Sorry, it's just a rant, but
that's all we do here
about this stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Nothing new here. I love it.
No. It's exciting. It's really
there's too much to talk about. I mean, that's why I'm just kind of pausing.
It's huge, and we've been going a couple hours, I guess, almost.
If somebody's still listening, boy, that's interesting.
Commitment.
That's commitment.
It's the new podcast, though, isn't it? We were talking about this. Podcasts are getting longer and longer. It seems.
They're getting so long. So, like I said, either something has to be like 30 seconds or less with subtitles on, social
I'm not
media.
Switching my phone on off silent. No chance.
Or it can be a 5.5 hour podcast.
Yeah.
In a 10-part series.
But a video that's 4 minutes long? Oh, no way.
It's the worst thing.
That. No way.
Yeah.
No, it's not worth it.
No.
That's so funny. Well, yeah, that's cool. Dude, this was really fun. I really enjoyed this a lot.
Again, hopefully, I mean, we might have made people in deconstructive upset image, pastors a little bit upset. I don't know. That's not our intention ever, but our intention is to obviously just get thoughts out there, concepts, maybe get somebody to think about, do I have confirmation bias? What can I deconstruct that I haven't? Am I deconstructing too much? So I just like hitting all these points and not really coming down super hard and with hard and fast rules on any of this stuff. But if we can just get people to think about things, I'm cool with that.
That's good. It's really
good.
This
is your podcast on your platform, so you can do with any. We didn't even say anything. We didn't say anything too radical or too extreme. We were very
not for usual.
No, we're very polite, very well behaved, actually.
Well, yeah, like
I'm impressed with ourselves. Yeah, we did a great job.
Well behaved.
The only thing we did was insult people from Milwaukee, which is fine, right?
Yeah, but they're in Milwaukee. I mean, like, what? Do they even have flights out to the UK? I'm fine.
Probably not. You're safe. This is the part. This is the part where we kind of like start backtracking and bailing on things and softening.
Whatever.
Whatever.
No, Milwaukee is amazing. Yeah,
it's awesome. I love that place.
I've never been, so.
Me either. Yeah.
I have never been to that whole region of the US. You know that? Like that whole area, like just is a mystery to me.
We should do a tour, man.
Yeah, dude. We need to. Well, I say we're doing a tour. I'll be in your area. I'll be in New England in April. I mean.
April, like 8th through 20th. So contact me if you're local and you know me. Contact Phil if you want to get in touch with me or book something through him. We'll do something.
Because we'll do something. We'll probably be touring around to some degree. I know we'll be like kind of Vermont, New Hampshire, or
New York
for sure. Go down towards like New York kind of area. Yeah.
I mean Connecticut, whatever. Yeah. Let's do it.
We could potentially go over to Wisconsin, right? I mean, it might be the only thing we do, but.
If it really catches fire and like Milwaukee becomes a thing, we'll do that.
Milwaukee becomes like the deconstruction hub of America.
Yeah.
It's like the biggest thing. A mega church of deconstructionists.
But there you go. See, who knows what's going to happen?
Who knows? With you as the pastor, right? Because you want to be a pastor.
The non-pastor. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, that'd be great.
I'd be the most frustrating pastor. Maybe somebody, if you like my personality, I guess maybe you'd like it. And I have some things I could say, but it would just, boy, would that be interesting.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Too many jokes. Yeah.
Yeah. I often think, all I do is drive people insane. And most of the time, not even intentional. A little bit intentional sometimes.
But you're one of my favorite speakers out there because you're entertaining, you're thoughtful. It's just, I love it.
But you get bored of me very quickly if I was week in, week out showing up, doing the same shtick.
I don't know.
You wouldn't want me to show up in the hospital to pray for you, because I'm
awesome,
here's the thing. I'd love to pray for you to be healed, but let's look at the 5 different ways that this actually works theologically. And we shouldn't probably nail down too quickly on any one view.
Here's this meme I found of praying for people in the hospital. It's so funny.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
No, I think, maybe I would be a bit more gracious than that. Hopefully, I would.
I think so.
Yeah. So all that to say, we're definitely not going to start a church in New England together.
Not yet. It doesn't look likely.
Old England.
Yeah, probably not.
Never called.
So. Yeah. But dude, this is awesome.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, man. Thanks so much for coming on. Do you want people to connect with you? I usually say hey, if you want to connect with Dan, check him out on Twitter or whatever.
How about? No, because that's all just that's not like that. Oh, how about my video with John Crowder?
Plug your music or?
No, not music. I just did a video with John Crowder like a month ago.
Oh, yes.
So look up the Jesus Trip and you'll see it's about announcements, church announcements. It's the longest interview on church announcements in history.
Nice. There you go.
Like half an hour. Yeah.
Do you know what's funny is someone messaged me the day that you posted that, and I watched it twice because I watched it and I found it so funny, and I watched it again with my wife and we laughed. So I've watched 40 minutes of church announcement videos.
There you go.
But that day, someone messaged me and they were like, "Oh, my church has just put me in the position of being in charge of church announcements."
Oh, perfect. Thank you, God.
The first time someone has ever sent me this message, and they were like, "Do you have any advice?" And I was like, "You're kidding, right?" I was like, "This is like," I was like, if ever I have doubted there is a God, right now it's immediately just gone out the window. I fully believe in God. But I sent her your link, and it was probably about.
You never heard back.
9 minutes after it was marked seen, she starts writing, and she's like, "I'm not sure I really fully get this. Is this a joke?" And I was like, "This is so funny." I was just
so
just keep watching. And she was like, "Okay, so it's definitely a joke." So.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I could not believe that was just perfect because no one ever asked me that. I mean, this is the thing, right? This is the thing with the pastors being expected to have all the answers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who sends me a message, right? And the person listening to this, no, if you're out there listening to this, this is meant as nothing is bad about you or anything. But I'm me, why on earth do people look at me and think this guy's got some stuff to tell, wise words about how to give church announcements? I'm like, this is not me, right?
Because you've been to 10,000 churches.
But, right, yeah, I've heard a lot of announcements, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But, I put them online, send out a text. That's my answer, right? Replace the person with a phone.
Hey, but you knew to send them to my video, so that's good.
That's true. So it's Jesus Trip Church Announcements.
It's on John
that?
Crowder's page. Yep, yeah,
John
Jesus
Crowder.
Trip. It's probably a couple Jesus trips ago.
You will have a good laugh if you do that. Honestly, it's funny. I loved it. You both were like full deadpan as well. Like
it was legit. It was serious, man.
Was that one take or was there a few takes?
It was one take straight. No, it wasn't scripted. People are like, oh, how long did it take? We didn't script it. We didn't.
You didn't even
practice
script it.
No, he wrote the question.
That makes things like deadpan so much harder though. He
wrote the questions ahead of time and then just asked them. And
that's so funny.
It's awesome.
Oh, I love it, dude. Dan, I absolutely love you, man. I'm excited.
You too, man.
I'll be over again in April anyway, so we're gonna do some traveling together. We'll probably do some Q&As in different people's homes and hang out, host discussions.
Maybe we could do another pod or Facebook Live.
Podcast. Yeah, and maybe a Facebook Live. We did that last time. Maybe we should do Instagram Live because Instagram is like just better these days. That'd be fun.
Yeah,
I'd love that. So
absolutely,
keep an eye out for that in April. And again, if you want to do some traveling or you want to come to some of our events, shoot us a message before April.
Yes.
After April, less likely.
Less likely. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll probably be back out again unless we have like a huge falling out somehow. That's
very possible.
Remarkably. I think we've never done it yet. But.
Oh, wait. Me and you? Or I thought you meant
me and you. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Whoa. How possible is it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You're like, after
very
this podcast,
likely.
Maybe.
Yeah. No, we'll be good forever. It's we'll see about others around us.
Yeah. We'll just slowly be visiting less and less churches throughout our careers.
And then hopefully more and more as things change and this
more than likely
catches fire.
Certainly more and more communities and people.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Awesome, Dan. Well, thanks so much for coming on anyway.
Love you, man.
Appreciate it.